All right, we're going to get started. So good evening and welcome to the regular board meeting. We're calling the meeting to order at 7:16 by my watch. May I have a roll call?
Ms. Livingston? Here. Mr. Tell?
Here.
Ms. Kelty? Here. Mr. Conine?
Here.
Mr. Lewis?
Here.
Mr. Holsizer?
Here.
Mr. Roberts?
Okay. I think everybody else is at the Cubs game. So it's us. So welcome to everybody who's come to see us this evening. It's officially parent-teacher. I feel like I'm talking to the converted here. It's parent-teacher week, in case you didn't know. And thanks to all the teachers for all the tremendous amount of work that's gone into it. And if there's any parents out there for participating in the conferences, because it's really a great time to partner with the teachers and your kids and make sure the year gets off to a good start. This fall has been really busy, and we're going to hear about that from Jason Lemke, due to the Future Ready District 36 Educational Master Facility Plan. And we've had a lot of community engagement opportunities, and thanks to board members and staff members and the community for attending in those. I think we've had 5 of them. And we also have chosen the core team, right? And you've got 7 community members on that. And so we're really happy that we've gotten such a huge community outreach and want to participate in holding our hands or holding hands with us and partnering with the Future Ready 36. So we want everybody to really stay involved in that process as much as possible. It's going to go on for a while and there's going to be a lot of meetings, but we really want to make this a group effort. We want the community to be involved, administrators and teachers, parents, kids, to be really involved so we have a product that we're all going to feel good about and be happy with. And lastly, again, I'm telling the converted out there, we are in negotiations with the WEA and the school board to go through some collective bargaining this fall in an effort to extend the current contract that we have. We feel like both the board and the association wanted to try to get this accomplished and out of the way so that we could really all focus on Future Ready District 36. So hopefully we'll be able to do that and do that efficiently and quickly. And with that, I think Tricia, I'm not sending it out to you.
Well, it's public comment.
Public comment. Sorry, I haven't gotten the script out with the red on it yet. Hang on. All right, is there any public comment? No, there is not. Communications included.
All right. There was one school board communication by Ms. Jennifer Groh about park scores, one FOIA request by Mr. Kirk Allen for financial information. There were 5 mentions in various local press, including the topics included Future Ready 36, the new kindergarten playground at Greeley, and the Skokie Garden Center. That's it.
Now it's good. Well, thank you. It certainly has been a busy time of the year, and we are excited. Those community outreach sessions that we've had for Future Ready D36 have garnered some. What was good sign is that for each meeting that we had more and more community members coming to the meeting. So by the end, the last meeting was at Greeley. We had over 40 community members present. So a total of over 140 parents and community members who participated in our first meetings for Future Ready. You're going to hear more about our Global Perspectives workshop, which is held next week. There's one session in the morning at 9:15 at Skokie, another one in late afternoon at Michelle's Hour 2, right? Or no, in the evening, in the evening at 7. So we do have postcards going out to our community about that shortly, as well as some invitations that are being distributed by our foundation members and PTO members. You'll see in our opening slide for October that it is monarch season. So if you've seen a lot of monarch butterflies walking around and singing, it was quite a delightful opportunity to witness our kindergartners. Now it used to be about 30 to 40 monarchs, and now we're up to 80 at Greeley. So it's exciting to see them all and see their proud teachers and parents as well. Students at Crow Island recently made a meaningful difference during the PTO-sponsored Run-a-thon, which raised over $5,000 to support athletes and Misericordia's Special Olympics track and field team. Skokie School also welcomed Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, who spoke about making a difference through leadership and civic responsibilities. We were honored to be an opportunity for a local lawmaker to come in and interact with our students. We also at Skokie and Washburn, we have started our first We36 Robotics Club, and we're gearing up for our first Lego League competition. So thank you to our community members and staff and students involved in that. And then Washburn Student Council did determine that all school fundraising this year would benefit hurricane relief efforts. So that was a democratic process as to how the children, our students here at Washburn, selected the beneficiary of their fundraising for the year, and so I've committed to helping that cause. I do want to also mention, there's been a lot on social media around this, and hopefully you'll participate, but it is National Principals Month. So I see all of you here on another late night contributing to our community, and I couldn't imagine a better group of leaders to be proud of working with our students and our staff, our parents, and wider community. Thank you for all of you do. It's no secret to the administrative team that I believe the most difficult position as an administrator are the principals. They manage a lot and always make sure that they have students' best interests at all their decision making. So thank you for all that you do, and happy Appreciation Month. So. Then finally, speaking, kind of getting back to Future Ready D36, we were also invited by New Trier High School to attend their dedication ceremony of their new upgraded facilities at the New Trier Winnetka campus. So I had the opportunity to be there on Sunday for the dedication ceremony, and at the ceremony they shared this video, very short video, about a little bit just trying to capture this multi-year process of upgrading, and knowing that we're venturing into a similar process, that would be helpful to see what they captured and what they shared with the community on Sunday.
When I think about the development of kids, and I think about what it means for kids to find their identity, find their purpose in life, understand who they are, build their skills, this is what school's about. This is a place where we want kids to feel safe, we want kids to feel like they belong. So the opportunities that we create, the buildings that we create are all part of bringing kids into that community. So school has to have that home feel as well. I belong here.
Teaching and learning here at New Trier has always been excellent. It's been excellent, like, in spite of the facilities. And so you try to think of all these ways to get around the limitations of the building or the environment.
Old cafeteria was hard as both a student and as a part of like extracurriculars, because that whole area of the building was really decentralized. So in student government, for example, it was hard to make stuff happen because just geographically we'd be like running all the way across the building.
I remember my first trip here when I applied for the assistant superintendent job, and my heart kind of sank. We're able to attract great people, but they come in and looked at the facilities and would say, really, this is New Trier? We really needed an update in every way, and so we began that process.
Anytime you invest in something of a project of this magnitude, I think that it brought really our community, meaning our parents, our students, and our staff together to really think about, you know, the education that we provide our students. And then it leads into then what would be the best facilities that we want for our students to be able to have the best opportunities.
We could actually improve kids' experience by having classrooms that were better equipped with furniture, better sized, and have better technology in them. All three of those things put together create a whole different learning environment for kids.
We were thinking about the light, we were thinking about students collaborating, how students could gather differently, how students could work in a library space. From
the beginning of what it means to programmatically design such a new large space to the project manager actually getting the materials and putting it together on a schedule which doesn't disrupt our students too much has been really a learning experience.
So what that allowed us to do is to add 26 new classrooms. It allowed us to offer a cafeteria that could actually accommodate our students. We accommodated access for people with both permanent and short-term disabilities. We, importantly, delivered a building that meets the needs and the expectations of our community and the modern teaching techniques of collaborative and integrated learning that the old building didn't accommodate.
You know, if you're in an old classroom and they're in that sort of double row horseshoe, just to be able to get to Bobby in the back row because he needs a little more help. Like now, just walk around the table and I'm right there, and he doesn't feel put on the spot, and I don't feel like I'm jumping over people, and we're able to make that connection and move on. Just so much.
So many more of my classes now involve talking to each other and interacting with each other because the new spaces allow us to do that. It definitely kind of builds a sense of community when we're able to move our desks however we want and really talk to each other.
The way that they feel being at school, the way they feel welcome in the school has exceeded my expectations.
This was money well spent. It was well executed and is going to serve this community for generations.
This design of the classrooms connected to a large group space and small group spaces is really unique, and I'm just eager to see how they'll be used.
It's a more positive place to be a student and to work on, I guess, academics and extracurriculars. It's just a better place to be, I think.
So a couple of things I know that New Trier is very much part of that community in every way, and so I know there's a great deal of appreciation for the support of this project. And then also important, as we always talk about, both from a curricular standpoint, a student experience standpoint, to understand the environment and the philosophy behind how the majority of our graduates end up at New Trier and how that is going to look differently. So I certainly hope that you have an opportunity to go see the space, and I know some of our board members have children there, so you see it in a very different way. But thank you for letting me share that this evening. So that was our opening. I'm going to shift gears now into our informational memos before we go into our presentations. So I'll start with the first memo, which is the Strategic Plan 2017-18 Annual Goals. So annual goals are established to further the vision and strategic outcomes that are set forth in the district strategic plan. This year's plan recognizes the time, energy, and resources needed to support the Future Ready D36 initiative, and of course the ongoing work of reaching all learners. So the reaching all learners goals, you'll see, does extend the continuum from students who need extra challenge or those who need extra enrichment, and everywhere in between, every combination thereof. And we have a focus on those, and the board will get regular updates. We're going to shift it a little bit to have a regular memo in every board packet that just gives highlights to what's happening in these goal areas. And then the board will have access to a comprehensive report mid-year and end of year as well. But this has been culminating work of the administrative team, the board, and staff since May. So. All right. The next is the Winnetka Parents Institute. So the district has had a long-standing commitment to parent education and outreach. So using feedback, we really upped our game last year on community and parent outreach and increased the amount of courses, so to speak, at least double. And so we want to continue with that work and tailor those presentations to the needs of our parents and in line with the district goals. So a fall 2017 WPI lineup shared with the board. I want to thank the presenters. We do tap a number of different resources in the community and our own staff and administrators. Kelly and Dave, and I know Tony and Josh at one point, now Michelle, have all contributed to this, but a parent favorite is the not quite little kid, not quite teenager, the developmental progression of the middle school child. I wonder why that's such a hot topic. But it's been a sellout crowd. I mean, how many times have you done that now, Dave?
4.
four times, and I think the attendance again continues to increase. Yes, okay. And so that's on the list. And also Daniel Ryan has one coming about the history of progressive ed in the district. I think the board actually recommended that after our last retreat, if I'm not mistaken, or I talked about that. So some highlights for some of the upcoming WPI sessions for our community. Okay. Next is the kindergarten program. So I wanted to give the board an update. Now I know later on in our agenda we have room for the board to give updates on committees, and there's where you have the board wanted to have an opportunity to visit some of our kindergarten classrooms. We've invested so much in our new program, and I've heard so much about it. It's different, quite different, being able to experience kindergarten than it is to read a memo. And so I am going to give an overview, but then maybe here's where the board might want to share some of their observations from their visits. Do you want to start with that before we go on? How have your visits been? Are you going to start, Jim? Should I start?
I visited Hubbard Woods and it was terrific, but one thing that was unusual is I think the day that I went, I thought I was just going to be sitting in, I don't mean just, but I thought I was going to be participating in one classroom, but because the monarchs are migrating to, I think it's Mexico, and it was drizzling, but all 4 classrooms were outside going through the migration exercise, and the music teacher was there. And I was so startled that there were 78 students, 8 teachers, 1 aide for a student who's from another country and speaks a different language, the music teacher, and it was very much in concert. It didn't feel segmented, and that's a lot of adults and small people. And they did a great job, and they migrated back to the classroom uneventfully. And then I just think sitting in the classroom, afterwards I realized there were probably non-Hubbard Woods students in the classroom, but I didn't feel it when I was in there. It felt very much a community of learners, and it had the similar spirit of when I was in some early classrooms observing before we did extended day. So I thought it was just, I was overwhelmed by this sense of, I would say, community. And I was sitting on the carpet, shoulder to shoulder, and I would go back. It was an enriching experience. So thank you, Beth, from Hubbard Woods.
Thank you for coming.
I also went to Hubbard Woods. I'm going to Greeley tomorrow, I think. And I was struck just listening to how many of the students started the year and have already changed into more extended day periods. So I think that the previous board's hard decision to make sure that was available was really good. Because watching, I think there are only 3 or maybe now 4 students at Hubbard Woods that are not on some version of extension. I think it's terrific. And their families are choosing that on their own choice. Students are choosing it what's right for them. But they are choosing to be in school more because they want to, and I think that's terrific. And I heard about operational issues for teachers trying to figure out how to make all the pieces work, and it sounds like Beth is doing a really good job trying to figure out how to do that. They said she's listening, so it was very positive.
And I went to Greeley, and all I can say is I was pretty impressed with the number of little people in the room, and the level of noise was not, I would say, proportionate. It was very quiet and busy bee-like, so I was pretty impressed with that. Couldn't do that job, I know that, especially with the additional 2 hours tagged on to the end of the day. But I thought it was really great. I saw a lot of kids working things out and using their words instead of hitting each other, which I thought was really pretty good. A lot of little girls trying to tell the little boys to use their words, but I enjoyed seeing what they were working on, and I know there was some assessments going on, so we could see where kiddos were, and saw some great show and tell, and how the teachers are trying to get the kiddos to ask meaningful questions and probe for information. So I thought it was really, saw a lot of seeds being sown for future years, I guess. So, yeah.
Okay. You did say in the walk-up, right, I think that it was a tough job to be that kindergarten teacher, math, right?
I said I would have been voted off the island.
Makes you wonder how you had kindergarten, didn't you?
Well, good. Well, thank you for taking the time and it has been a labor of love to get this program off the ground, and it'll be humming or buzzing, as you would say. It's exciting to see that in action. There's certainly been logistics that we've had to work through, and I appreciate everybody, especially Brad, your efforts in transportation and our building administrators and Matt Kurtzman. It's just been a helpful team to really work these kinks out, and a very patient parents and happy students. So that's good. So let's talk a little bit more now, logistically, about the program. So let's start with those current kindergartners that we are serving right now. We are going to, in November, we would like to launch, and we are also working collaboratively with the PTO committee on kindergarten. So we have that continuous parent voice in this process to make sure communication is clear. But we will launch communication that clarifies that new board policy that the board enacted last year, which will allow current kindergarten families who might have attendance at homes in the attendance area of Crow Island specifically to stay at either Hubbard Woods or Greeley if they, or at least request them to the board for consideration. So we want to clarify how that works. So everybody's, if anyone's listening or watching this video, it's writing a letter to the superintendent that will then go into board review at the next meeting and then voted upon. And in this special policy too, those families can ask for the duration of the child's experience and their siblings to stay at that school, which is a special carve out for this group that's been impacted by the short-term kindergarten solution. In January then, we're looking at January 16th. That's when we'd ask families to make a request. That would be the deadline, the ideal deadline, because it would allow us to ensure that we have appropriate staffing plans for the following year. The board would look at the January board meeting, make approvals or denials, and then notify those families. And then, of course, in spring, we would begin transitioning those students who might be returning back to Crow Island. And we're very careful and cautious about that too, because I know parents are often eager to get that transition process started earlier, and we have to think about this for 4, 5, and 6-year-olds. We'll see 5 and 6 years at that point, but what's going to be makes the most sense to them. So that's where we're really going to make sure that we stay balanced as far as how parents can help transition, but really how students need to feel and continue to feel very vested in their current classroom. So we'll work through that process. And then as far as our incoming kindergarten class for next year, we will continue with our December 1st. It's been pretty traditional, December 1st registration. Based on feedback though from that kindergarten committee, we will host it at a single site. So I want to thank Washburn and their KW staff who will free up a gym for us here so that we can host the registration here on December 1st. And then we will have future ready information for those families. But one of the things we also want to do is to minimize any ambiguity around this process. And so now that we know our future ready D36 process, DLR has been a great partner with us, really laying out a very comprehensive plan and detailed plan, knowing by the end of this school year is when we want to have a determination where our next roadmap will lead us in the next 5 years specifically. What I'm asking for is just the board doesn't have to vote on this, but just the nod to go ahead and start letting these families know that we will have kindergarten offered in the same way next year as we do this year. So that sooner the better to get that information out. We'll have clarity of this registration. We will do our best to honor the geographic kind of placements that we made this year, but we also have to look at our capacity. We don't want to move one problem from one school to the other, so we will make sure to be very thoughtful about that. But we do want to go ahead and get information out that we will have extended day program continue at Washburn, or excuse me, that'd be interesting, at Hubbard Woods and Crow Island. Please write that for the record on 11. And then we'll go ahead, the board, once we have that feedback, then the board in February will approve those attendance boundaries. And then by early March, we'll be able to inform those kindergartners of their assigned school so we can start those transition processes. And then have some time if anybody wants to appeal their placement decision. So I just want to make sure is the board comfortable with the recommendation of the administration, and we actually ran this through the court team as well, and they agreed to get this information out sooner than later. Okay. Everybody's good, okay, and you understand the nuances that we can't guarantee the same attendance boundaries, but we will certainly try as hard as we can to honor as close as possible.
Did we run tight in capacity this year?
Yeah, we will run a
Okay,
little
so-
tight, but we have, you know, the good news about building a kindergarten program is we're getting more kindergartners and more families earlier, so we, you know, Hubbard Woods didn't have as much room as Wheatley, so we just want to watch that.
Before we need kindergarten, and I'm sure this is in your planning, but as I sat there and I was watching kindergarten, I was trying to think through all the kind of deciding factors that we discussed when we talked about an extended day and how the kindergarten teachers were going to be using their, I want to, additional time, and I use the term loosely, in the afternoon. But just to get a sense of how, kind of, I guess, an evaluation of how the first year went or is going, and what do we learn from it, and what do we feel like we need to do differently or to change? Because I guess I'm a little unclear, and it's not for discussion here, but would like to hear about how they're able to meet together and use that planning time and work towards the curriculum, I guess, and how they're using that extra hour. I know there's, or not extra hour,
Right, but
the hour at the end of the day.
We have everything from, I think what you're asking for is we have lunch decisions, and we're to offer lunch to how are teachers able to collaborate, how are they able to use that time, how is it actually, you know, you can plan something and have it, your best, very educated approach, and then real life happens, and what does that really look like? So we will come back, we do have that on our board calendar, so we will come back with an analysis for you on that.
It's a great idea. Do we also have the ability maybe to give a kind of basic survey to the parents of this outgoing kindergarten class, just to say, you know, you were our first extended day class, what did you see as really working well, and what do we need to be working on? Because they'll have good feedback too.
We can work with our PTO group actually on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a short, give us your thoughts after this first year is completed of what worked well and what didn't.
Because I know we talked a lot about the social emotional learning that needs to take place, and teachers were seeing the need for that.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was seeing a lot of it. I was there from 1 to 2, so I think that's when that kind of thing is supposed to be happening. The curricular stuff is when we're learning. So I was happy to see that, and I guess I'd just love to hear, you know, all the things we considered. What are they seeing that's actually taking place in the classroom? Yeah.
That's great. And we will have refinements to next year's program for sure. So, all right, anything else about kindergarten? All right. The next very different topic is the update on the proposed TIF district in the village of Winnetka. So we have a memo here updating you. We were invited to a special village council meeting last week, and Brad and person attended with me, and then also we had some other, Paul Sally was there with his business manager from New Trier. We are a library director there as well, and some other interested community members. So that we watched a couple hours of the board the village council really reviewing the TIF option and what that would look like. They certainly haven't made any decision yet on this, and are very cognizant of the impact on the other taxing agencies, and committed publicly to wanting to work with us. We are continuing to meet as administrative level. So we even have a meeting this week where we're going to continue to talk with the village about our shared goals, but also our concerns about you know, the impact this would have on our taxpayers when this board has been so cognizant of the fact of watching that tax rate and just returning the $30 million back to the community early to have some tax relief, and then have that negatively impacted by this TIF. We want to make sure that that's very clear. So we'll be working closely with the village on that piece. So we'll keep you updated. I don't know if anybody else has anything to add or to that. You can watch that meeting too on video if you want. So. Okay. Next is just an update on reaching all learners for the K-2 intervention. This is another area where the board certainly invested in kindergarten, but also invested in intervention support at the elementary level specifically. And you'll see what our goals were in this plan. We're really to increase the trained intervention staff for Tier 2, Tier 3, the earlier intervene on behalf of students The research is pretty clear. The less we need to support them as they get older, it's really an investment in a child and also financially, quite frankly. That's why preschool is so important. And so we invested in this. And then we want to see an increase in those services resulting long-term in a decrease in those special education needs. And then we want to make sure that those students can generalize the experiences they have in a intervention group to the regular classroom. So this just kind of sets up. We purposely, thank you, Beth, didn't put a lot of jargon and a lot of extra information. Try to make really clear what we've implemented, what our goals are, and then when we'll be coming back to you with that information as well, and the data for that.
Is there any way to also see how the intervention is correlating to some of the other assessment data that we're doing relative to like MAP and some of the things that as we're using this to kind of have a growth mindset? I think it would be really helpful to see how all of this intervention investment is correlating to the things that we're using to really measure performance in our district.
And obviously for kindergarten first graders, we won't be able to see that until their third grade but we will be collecting intervention data on students. And then that is the ultimate goal, is to see less need of special education and higher performance for children the older they get. It's actually part of the goals, long-term goals and metrics for that. Anything else on that? All right, next, Crow Island Furniture. We continue to be so appreciative of VS America and the donation that they are giving to Crow Island School, and we understand that with art takes patience sometimes when you're working with designers, and so I actually have an update to this memo. So we just learned hot off the presses, I think late yesterday, that we were hoping to get our furniture we were supposed to get our furniture by winter break. We now have learned, because of some sort of custom laminate ordering, we will get it now for spring break. So, but we're very thankful. It's great to have this. So this timeline is a little outdated as of 4 o'clock yesterday. So we'll keep you updated. Any other questions? All right, next is just the Winnetka Public Schools Foundation annual plan, which is just a tremendous support for our schools. We can't thank the foundation enough for all of the efforts that are made to continue to allow us to be innovative and try new things and support our staff in their learning. And so what's attached is their annual plan, which has granted over $100,000 to our schools. A lot of that comes through a competitive granting process. So you can look at that. We're just very fortunate to benefit from the foundation. Okay. And thank you to our staff too for wanting to go above and beyond, because it does take a lot of time and energy to write those grants and implement those as well. All right, I think we've completed our informational update, so we're going to shift gears now to presentations. So we have 2 this evening. So the first is an update on our Future Ready D36. We knew this was going to be a process that would slowly ramp up at first, and then we start to go on light speed a little bit here. So we're very excited to give you, Jason's coming to the podium to give you an overview. The memo, again, has a nice highlight of all the major steps we've taken from the last board meeting to this one. You have the core team roster in your board memo, and then of course information about the upcoming workshops and communication that's going on to our community. So I will pass over this time to Jason. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It indeed has been a period of intense activity with more to come, particularly next week. Has a lot of activities going on pertaining to curriculum and instruction, as well as global perspectives 1 week from today. So my usual plug to please come to that session. We hope to pack the house, if you will, so that we can start this conversation in earnest in phase 2 with the broader community. So our update for this evening, the stakeholders comprising the core team, as was mentioned, is in your information. We did meet on October 5th, had a wonderful 2-hour session with the core team and got folks oriented, gave them all very big 3-ring binders to keep tallies on the process as we move forward, in paper copy as well as electronic copy, which of course will be provided along the way. So we've encouraged them to participate and as many meetings as they are available to do so along the way. We recognize that it is an intensive process at times, and so additional core team meetings have been penciled into the calendar, and we're looking forward to those events as well. We are in phase 2. Phase 1 was completed with our 5th and final presentation just merely days ago, as it were. Just a calendar update. This again will continue to be updated on the district website as new events are added, but we are in between what was our Eco Charrette, which I'll summarize in just a moment here, and our curriculum instruction workshops, which begin in earnest next week. Global Perspectives, of course, is next week as well. We're going to do some facility tours, some additional student ideation, and of course our board meeting coming up in November. So we've gotten quite a bit done already. You can see the list of activities on screen. Many of these were summarized in great detail in our community session, so I won't go into detail this evening. Activity logging, as you all shared your stories about visiting kindergarten, I was reminded of our stories of spending time in each one of the facilities and understanding with a greater degree of detail what was happening in each one of your facilities, both through our observations and your teachers' activity logging. Indoor environmental quality, we had great participation from your students throughout the process, as well as the presentations that were given to the community. We had a wonderful representation from each one of the schools talking about the things that they learned in their experiences along the way. We did also qualify district high performers and low performers when it comes to indoor environmental quality, and this is worth advertising a few different things when we get to this information as well. The difference between the high performers and low performers was extremely close. So we might had one facility which was 2 points higher in any given category than another. So just because there was a high and a low doesn't mean there were any outliers, if you will. A list of low performers as well. Now, my other caveat to this is a lot of our thermal comfort issues were qualified by an unseasonably temperate September. And so we are going to continue to monitor thermal comfort through the winter. Obviously, it's not just about cooling in the shoulder months, it's also about heating in the winter months, and what do we provide for thermal comfort in those particular times as well. So stay tuned for additional information and qualifications on thermal comfort as we move throughout the school year. Representation of the student ideation, we had lots of wonderful ideas, pools, trampolines in the hallway, lots of energetic youth put to task when it came to student ideation and what they saw for the school of the future and what they might change in their school facilities. So I wanted to share a little bit about our preliminary results on some of the community polling that was taken at each one of the school facilities. You can see we had some great attendance. Over 150 folks chose to spend their evening with us learning more about their facilities. Some bullet point takeaways. Most of the attendees don't feel that the facilities support the academic needs of their students. There's an opportunity to improve them. Now, this process will qualify what that means. We don't know the order of magnitude that input was based upon, but we do know that there's indeed an indicator that more information is required. They also indicated that experiential learning and fine and related arts are two of the most valued offerings in the district beyond the core academics. They certainly felt that the buildings were in good repair. They do need updating and modernizing from a mechanical perspective. We qualified that. Several minor physical condition assessment items and a few things to continue to monitor throughout the process. Lastly, but not least, the educational program and community feel and design of the spaces were three most important elements of the schools selected by the attendees. So they obviously value the wonderful education that you're providing for their students. The community feel went to the culture of the building, how you felt when you walked around the school, the morale, the student engagement, those sorts of things. That was an important qualifier. And then how the spaces are working. Now, I want to qualify this a little bit in saying that the spaces largely have focused on themselves, the singularity of the space. I think what opportunity we'll have to explore further in phase 2 and beyond is how do they work collectively? How do they work as a unit or a number of spaces together to further teaching and learning opportunities for your facilities? So with that, I'll just go briefly through the questions. There were 11 in total. We did see the highest number of stakeholders identify themselves as parent, grandparent, or guardian. We did have some wonderful representation of students as well. I wanted to acknowledge that. I know they take time out of homework and being with their families at home to come to these events, and we definitely appreciate that. Staff and administration, board representation, I know that several of you were at several of the events throughout. Crow Island and Carlton Washburn were the two highest. Currently have a student ad. Of course, we offered the opportunity to answer more than one of these if you had many ages of students in your household. Drilling into a little bit of the detail from the summary, the quick facts, you can see how the spread works here. Experiential learning was seen as the most valuable thing. E there, and then fine arts, related arts, those sorts of things. And then, STEAM, coding, robotics also scored quite highly, social emotional learning. Facilities are in good repair. We echo that given their age and relative to facilities of a similar ilk. There were a number of folks who answered C. They weren't sure or don't know. Obviously, they came to learn that information from our presentation, so that was not unanticipated. The C here is really telling for me, again, as I highlighted earlier, there's an opportunity to improve the facilities. There's, if we think critically about everything in our lives, there's of course an opportunity to make improvement no matter what we do. So, but the resonance of this, you can see the order of magnitude of this response in contrast to the other response. Take A, for example, they're ideally suited to their task, was much lower. So this is an opportunity for us to qualify that moving forward and then harness those ideas moving into the fruition of the plan. Not surprisingly, thinking about thermal comfort and HVAC and those kinds of things, when we think about updating or repairing our facilities, we recognize that there's a need there, even though they are well maintained. This was kind of even, and surprisingly so. Most districts, I asked this question too, we get a much higher contingent of folks saying no to this. So obviously your folks are very familiar with the pickup and drop-off scenarios at each one of your campuses. We also learned a little bit about the historical details of the school. Folks felt that those were important, so we want to learn more about what that is. It's difficult to lump everything into one category of details without additional qualifications. So just as all of these answers, it's a representative sample size of the folks who participated in these events. It's not to infer that the entire community feels one way or another, but it just is additional information for us to ask more meaningful questions as we move through the process. Most important elements of the school, again, educational programming was the answer that resonated most with folks that evening. Enlightening and informative. Now, this was honestly a little bit of a surprise to me. Answer F, I was not surprised, was the most answered, if you will, and I expected there to be more of an information gap, so that tells me that their community is very engaged in their facilities and is aware of some of the things that you have been talking about when it comes to enrollment balancing, those kinds of things. So they heard things that were supportive of those impressions. And then we asked them, what might they prioritize first? And you can see the answers there. Thermal comfort, of course, was a high one, as well as updated classrooms, those sorts of things. We also allowed additional write-in answers. Since we are cross-tabulating data amongst all of the questions, we wanted to keep the answers the same, but of course recognize that there are a myriad of opportunities when it comes to prioritization that could be addressed by any one stakeholder, and such we allowed those write-in answers, and we've qualified all of those as well. We also asked for their bold ideas, and so you can see a representative sample of the bold ideas that the community shared with us during those sessions. So I'll just highlight a few. Museum-like approach to learning. I think that this is a reflection of the good work that you're already doing and perhaps accelerating the application of some of those things. Some nod to a sustainable endeavor like net zero, geothermal, solar, wind, ways that you can have your facilities do some work for you and help the bottom line at the same time, as well as create some educational opportunities for your students and understanding what those jobs might hold for them one day in the green economy. This was perhaps one of the more meaningful quotes that we'd received through the process, and it came from a student here in this facility. And they said that they wanted the school to look like schools in Finland, modern, easy to learn in, and fun to be in. I want to be able to say that I want to go to school. And so pretty powerful from a student here in this district. And I think that what it says to me is that there's an opportunity here, that you're doing great things, your facilities are working for you in certain respects, but obviously we can create a greater sense of community even yet from where you're at today, as well as further the learning opportunities. You all hopefully have had a chance to peruse some of the infographics that were created from each one of the facilities. These are available online for the community to download. If you didn't have a chance to visit one or maybe most of those sessions, you certainly have access to those. I encourage you to keep those as reference documents moving forward through the process. We completed what we call a values workshop. So values is an acronym that stands for viewing architecture through the lens of user experience and sustainability. There are many benchmarks out there about sustainable school facilities, but they don't often take into consideration the user experience and how students, community members, teachers, administrators engage in that endeavor in your schools. And so you can see a few representative examples from the worksheets of the group that day. We spent 3 hours together talking about ideas and how they might be brought to bear in the plan. Now there will be a large summary document that's prepared in the coming days for those folks to review, make sure we heard them correctly, and then that information will be available for wider distribution.
Who was in that group? Teachers, students?
There were teachers in that group. There were some community members as well. We weren't able to get students. Of course, they were busy in their daily activities, but it was a good group. And most of the folks in the room had a really solid understanding of the topics at hand, because the amount of detail that was shared and received during that presentation or that workshop session was quite intensive. So it was a basic level of understanding would have gotten you so far, but the detail that those folks were able to bring to us was incredible in that amount of time. So some upcoming events. Obviously, we've spoken about Global Perspectives next week, Tuesday. Curriculum instruction meetings are happening on Monday, on the 23rd. There'll be 2 such sessions. Again, this is an opportunity for teachers in particular, as well as district leadership and administration, to come and participate and talk about the future of progressive learning here in this district. Global Perspectives is a wonderful opportunity for the community to learn more about what's happening in the world of education from a facility perspective, higher education, workplace, those sorts of things. So come and learn about those topics. We're going to do some local tours later in the month here as we transition into November already. Gosh, it's hard to say that, but we're getting close to November already. Facility subcommittee meeting at the end of the month, and then some core team meetings scheduled accordingly. So as we get into December, you'll note that there aren't any core team meetings scheduled. That was intentional. We'll be in phase 3 by that time, which is the programmatic interpretation of a lot of the data that has been garnered through phase 2. That's mostly an internal activity for my team to do. It also allows the core team to spend time with their families and friends through the holidays. 9:15 a.m. and 7 p.m. are the 2 times for Global Perspectives next week. They'll both occur at Skokie. So if you can't make the morning session, please try and come to the evening session. Now, with that said, they are the same. So you don't need to come to both, but if you can prioritize in your schedules, folks, I encourage you to come and attend. Any questions from the board at this time?
Yeah, I'm curious, we had 156 people over the 5 meetings, right? How does that, I mean, did that meet your expectations? Was that less interest, more interest in terms of community? And I'm just wondering, are we getting the community members involved in partaking in these information sessions as we had hoped and tried to do?
I would say that you're on track. That's a good percentage given the number of facilities that you have and the enrollment that you have. Just in comparison, a similar process a year or so ago in Barrington yielded a lower attendance for a greater number of facilities. So I think that your community has shown a readiness and willingness to come and learn and listen and share their input. So I'm excited about what lies ahead in future phases.
On that same note, does the number of people attending meetings, does it rise through the process as more information is released and more people kind of becomes on their radar? Do you see the attendance go up?
The correlation for me is at the Global Perspectives meeting, and that's why I think that I've made a conscientious effort to continue to share that date and encourage folks to come, because that's a direct corollary to future attendance. If we can share the information and they can get a broader context, they're more apt to continue to participate along the way. Without that very important meeting, that information, that context, if you will, it's more challenging to get them involved until the end of the process. And so I want to continue to get folks out to one of those 2 meetings next week, and then, of course, continue to participate along the way.
Right, and I would say our PTOs have been great in our foundation. Kate Hughes, our communications coordinator, have designed personalized invites from the board, similar to what you've seen, the content that you saw in the postcards, but it can be sent personally to people, or we ask them to really target non-parents. So each foundation member, each executive school PTO member, we ask them to take at least 5 to personally invite someone to this meeting next week. We've also talked to the chamber. We have our realtor group we've connected with, where we've sent these invitations out to all of the area preschools this week so that they can distribute them to their Winnetka, at least their board members there, to try to get our younger parents. Some of the known community members that have been engaged in the school communities, such as former board members and things, we personally sent invitations to. We've talked to the high school, so we've really tried to make sure that we've been creative and been thoughtful about how we're getting the word out and really getting excitement around this. I want to thank everyone's efforts on that as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jason.
Absolutely.
Just a couple of radar moments for the board. So obviously next week for that Global Perspectives, if you can make it, I know Jennifer needs to be at least one of them as the core team rep, but if you are interested, let me know so that we can make sure that you're there and we're not having to post a meeting. What was that?
Should it only be 3 board members?
Well, it can only be 2 technically, or else we'd have to determine if we're going to post it or not, have a public comment associated with it. So we've tried to keep it clean and separate from a board meeting, so I think we'd send 2 different messages if we did post it, but I do think it would be worthwhile, especially some board members who haven't been able, for good reason, to make the first round with some board conflicts. If you are in town next week and able to make that, please let me know. And then it's the 24th, right? And then we have a local tour, so again, you can join those. We're going to go in the immediate region, then extended in Chicago on the 27th or 1st. It can be a full day or half day. So if you want to join the core team on that, you're welcome to join as well. Let me know. And then we're hoping to have that facility subcommittee right around October 30th. That's a purposeful date that was selected. At that, you're going to get feedback from the core team around their site visits and a suggestion on where we might have regional site visits outside of state, and justify that to the facility subcommittee. So we want to make sure there's that nice line, a through line, before we continue to proceed with that plan. So that's why the facility subcommittee needs to meet then.
The morning meeting is at 9:30.
9:15.
9:15. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Shifting gears as Barry gets situated, we're jumping into our fall assessment report. So we have worked over time with the administration and the board and the staff to really refine this presentation to make sure we strike as best as possible that right blend of accountability and wanting to make sure we take a full view of this and the board understands this data, but also making sure that we put this in the bigger picture of two of our district's philosophy, our whole child approach, that this is certainly important data that we respond to in our continuous improvement model. But of course, there are other factors, and those are in our district improvement plan even, and multiple measures and multiple ways to determine the success, growth, and achievement of our students. And so we've refined this over time. Thank you. We've had many board members who took us up on the offer to kind of preview this, to help give some feedback on this report. So thank you for that. We want to make sure this is clear, that it's that right depth, and also is helpful for our, of course, number one, ultimately this information for our educators to help inform their instruction. So as we go through this as a reminder, so we give this report now because actually all school districts do, because we're required to give the state assessment report to our school boards this month before the state goes live with all of their individual school results by the end of the month. And then we typically come back to this board. We really try to hone this because our goal is to not have one assessment in isolation, because you miss kind of the bigger picture when you don't have multiple assessments to look at to help triangulate the data. So we have this now that has PARC, MAP, and some of the Nutrier data from the perception survey, and then we come back again typically at the end of the year with our district improvement plan data to give you that information from the year's worth of time. And of course, there are some intermediate updates, and we certainly don't leave the board in the dark, but those are kind of the two official board presentation reports. So, Barry?
Great. Thank you, Tricia, and I'd like to thank the board. I'm also joined tonight by Principal Dave Canny, who also helped particularly with the Nutrier articulation, and our data specialist, Phil Erbolino. Hello, Phil. So as Tricia was saying, it is part of our district goals and vision. And we speak specifically about supporting the growth and achievement and making a meaningful difference for all of our students. And so I think that speaks to the fact that we want to move the needle, but we certainly want to do it the right way. And that's through highly engaging, effective learning experiences. We've also established a goal of reaching all learners, which is providing meaning and context for our major assessments. As we mentioned before, we've introduced a number of new assessments over the past few years. So it only follows that we need to start to build coherence and meaning for our parents. I'm also happy to say we're joined by a lot of administrators here who now know that data is really a team effort here in D36 as we continue to work with our teachers to move our instruction forward. Furthermore, when addressing all learners, we really want to emphasize the ability to personalize learning for every student. So as much as these reports are important, the real work is in the classroom, working with students and helping every individual student and helping inform instruction. Tonight's assessment focuses on three major assessments: the PARC assessment, the MAP assessment, and the Nutrier freshman perception survey. As we mentioned, we have a number of other assessments in the district at this particular point. This certainly isn't all of them, but these are many of our major assessments. So we have early literacy screeners, early math screeners, our TC reading levels. We also have a state science assessment, which we're awaiting data for, and also the added fitness gram, and brand new to this year as well is the kids kindergarten assessment, which our teachers are working on now. So a great deal happening in the assessment world. Just to give you a little context in terms of the data review timeline, we think data is best when it is ubiquitous and is used as part of that ongoing learning experience for us as a learning community. In the beginning of the year, we received PARC data that was administered in the fall, so we actually received that data. There's a few months of a lag before we receive that. We mail that information out to parents. We start to review that data. We establish some initial goals based on that PARC data, based on the MAP data from the end of the year, and based on our experiences with our teachers. By the end of the month, by the end of September, we've administered the MAP exam. We actually now are able to turn that around much quicker. So one of the great things about the MAP program is that you get, in effect, real-time data. So within 24 hours of that assessment window closing, teachers can go ahead and start to do that data analysis. We then put this information together in a board report, which is featured this October. Our teachers get a first look at it. We then take that information and work with our teachers, our leadership teams, our collaborative learning teams, and we build out our district improvement plan, again, based on the goals that we've established in our plan and the new data. So moving forward, that helps to frame the ongoing work of our committees, of our teachers throughout the year. Just some context and background for PARC. Just to remind everybody, PARC is the official state assessment of Illinois. There is a contract which expires in 2018 with PARC, so We don't know what the future of Park is. We do know we have it for at least one more year. We are one of 6 states that are still using Park. So there's a number of other states using Smarter Balance, which is also a Common Core aligned assessment. We also see other tests who have abandoned either one of those tests, but have opted for their own state assessment. In most cases, it is a Park-like test. And in many cases, they actually are purchasing test items from Park. So whether or not Park goes away in the near term, we're still going to be faced with this, and a state assessment looks very much like the Park by all accounts.
Yeah, we do know that Park was already just, this is cutting news. So
Cutting news, right, okay.
News. But it is disbanded and been bought by a new organization, The Question. So we know it's going to be reconstituted again and look differently. And so fortunately, we're able to kind of have inside scoop on this, working with a small group of superintendents. I'm going to be in Springfield on Thursday. Actually, Ray Lechner's joining me at Wilmet in this area. And we're working with the state in the best way to implement this assessment, make sure it's growth-based, as the accountability framework is changing considerably with the new federal law of ESSA, which is going to be focused much more on growth than attainment. Attainment will still be part of that. So we're trying to put those pieces together to make sure it's a fair, reliable, and helpful tool for us to use. So it's just important to know as we go through this. So
Absolutely, and I think one of the commonalities we're going to find is just the link to standards. And one of the things that Park is particularly good at, it is closely aligned to the state standards. In fact, this past year, they've also provided an evidence statement, which actually links every test item to a specific standard. So that's highly detailed work that our facilitators are doing to help translate that for our teachers. The data that you're going to see tonight is actually the Park spring assessment. So when we talk about a 6th grade student, they're currently 7th graders. So if we're talking about a 5th grade student, they're currently 6th graders. Okay. I will say that Park has made some changes that were needed. After the first year, as you remember, it was administered twice a year. It was 7 or 8 assessments for one student. It was a little bit over the top, if you will. Last year, they actually reduced it to 1 testing window. This year, they've actually reduced even some of those testing windows and shortened some of the tests. So students are typically going to see 3 tests, depending on the grade level, and tests anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes. Participation rates have increased, and I think this is a positive thing for this assessment. It's also positive whether or not you like Park. It's positive because we want to build a positive testing culture. We want our students coming to school, taking these tests seriously, and building their skills. What you do see is it increased again another 5%. And I think what that ultimately means is it translates into more validity and reliability to the actual assessment. 8th grade still lags the other grades, and probably provide an educated guess why that is based on the timing of the year. But they're actually getting up to a number where their results are becoming more significant. Park actually provides the results in individual score bands. Score bands are correlated to a scale scores, and they have meeting expectations, exceeding expectations, and as we mentioned before, those thresholds are much higher than we saw before with the ISAT assessment. There's also an additional category, which is approaching expectations, and I think some of the students in that category actually in the past would have been meeting expectations. And those are students who are getting close to meeting all, I think, the understanding required for success at the next level, but they do need some additional help. So it's also important they added that additional level, and of course we have level 2 and level 1. So we have provided some visuals to help look at the data. And so what we did with this particular information, we took the township average and we compared our average. And what you'll see is a green and blue in each of the bars. The blue part is exceeds, and the green part would be meets. So this is for ELA. Okay. So Park covers ELA, which is reading and writing and different aspects of that. One of the things I think, wrong button here. Okay. But you see when you look at cross performance, we always kind of look at the shape of the curve. Soon we'll also look at how that looks compared to the state, just for some normative data. But across the board, what you'll see is that the data is pretty comparable to township schools, which are, no surprise, some of the top scores in the state. What we do see is fairly even here. One of the things that you'll notice though, as an area of growth, when you start to look at the dark blue versus the light blue, the exceeds category, this is an opportunity for growth for us. We started seeing this back in the spring in some other data sets. And I think that this is an opportunity for the district really to focus, as Tricia was mentioning before, reaching all learners, those high readiness learners, students ready for additional challenge, so on and so forth. It also speaks to the, the level of rigor that is now required with the new standards. Particularly when we're looking at that area for, exceeds, it's in the middle grades, so grades 4, 5, and 6. We also want to kind of point out this particular cohort right here. This is a cohort, if you've been following the assessment reports for the past few years, really since 2013 in ISAT, that cohort was identified as having some discrepant performance as compared to the township and even as compared to the other grades here. We're going to find out that we are seeing some growth there, but we still do see kind of that differential in this particular cohort. This is now your current 7th grade cohort. As we get into 7th and 8th grade, we're seeing some really positive results here. In English, we see both in the meets categories and the exceeds categories. These are some of the top scores in the state and scores that are above the township average. We just replicated this particular data. It's in your data pack. I'm not going to go over this, but this is basically including Winnetka as part of that average. It doesn't really change, maybe a % or 2 here or there, so it doesn't really change much to most of those curves. So same conclusions we can draw. Looking at the state, so a couple of board members quite aptly commented and quite correctly commented that we don't want to really compare ourselves to the state, and I think we certainly don't want to do in terms of setting our bar for performance. So we've got a long tradition of exceeding the state by quite a bit, and we want to continue to do that. But what it does provide is it does provide some normative data, which is important, because sometimes you'll see all tests are not created at the state level. There are trends from year to year, and so it's important to kind of point some of those things out. And some things are obvious and somewhat simple to measure. So, for instance, if you looked at 8th, 7th grade performance, it's certainly higher here, but it's certainly over here. Again, you'll see twice as many kids hitting exceeds in the state as maybe the grades next to them. So those are the types of things we look for when we start to look at some of that state data. Here is mathematics. This is our park, again, once again, Winnetka and a township average. And again, just to remind everybody, if we're talking about 3rd grade, right, that's, they're currently 4th graders. So in the area of mathematics, again, we see that 6th grade cohort, okay, showing that differential. In the middle grades in particular, you might see some of that difference right there in terms of the exceeds category. Students in the 8th grade, we saw similar data when we looked at the MAP data. Our 8th graders performing quite well compared to the township and certainly compared to the state. Okay. State level data, again, just in terms of some of that normative data, we did see a drop off a little bit from grades 3 to 4, but again, here's where the normative data comes in handy. You'll also notice that from a state perspective, the state also dropped 6 percentage points and less than half of the number of students in terms of that. So across the other grades, it's fairly even, but again, it's important to kind of look at that only for that reason. This is cohort comparison, and over time, this chart will perhaps evolve into a line graph. I don't know, it gives us some of that longitudinal data, but now we have 3 years of data under our belt for Park ELA and for Park Math. And we'll start to look at some patterns which may be leading into some trends. Grades 4, 5, 6, I'm sorry. This was the group here where we mentioned this was the group that was perhaps struggling in the past, but we are actually starting to see some nice growth from that particular group. We're also going to see some nice growth on math as well. I think it speaks to some of the good work that's been done at Skokie School in supporting the students and bringing in a math interventionist, having a skills block, so on and so forth. Nonetheless, we still want to continue to address this. We're not happy with this. We think there's an opportunity to continue to watch this group, and it's Dave and Tony now have this group, in their stead and working with them closely. This is the math comparison, okay? And so in math comparison, we do see kind of that 3rd to 4th grade, we see kind of a drop there We also saw that similar kind of drop within the state, perhaps a little bit more here, something we're going to want to be aware of, and something we're going to do. We want to follow this cohort as they have their upcoming assessments. Going across the board, again, we kind of see the shape of this curve again with some of the middle grades. But again, I think this cohort tells a story. I will just say something about cohorts too. When, looking at other districts' data, it's not unusual to have a cohort here or there, depending that you're going to find one that is discrepant from the rest. It's just part of naturally what happens. And again, importantly, we see this nice from 6th, 7th, 8th. We see a real nice growth curve here for our students. One thing we're able to do beyond what's supplied by the state and just conventional work that we normally do is work with Phil Arbolino to look at the change of performance levels. So what we see is that we see things normalizing, and certainly English language arts, a little bit of an improvement there in terms of number. We've got 25% of students moving up, 17 moving down. In math, it's pretty even. Okay. Again, we can see there may be movement within those levels, but these are just specific level jumps. This data and some additional data will be on the IllinoisReportCard.com. It's also an opportunity. Illinois Report Card actually is providing some new tools which we're looking forward to. One of them, the question has come up, like how do sometimes we want to compare ourselves to schools that maybe have similar demographics? And one of the tools that they're providing is a scatter plot diagram, which actually uses percent low income versus achievement. So you can, for instance, look on that scatter plot, scroll over schools 0 to 5%. So I'm hoping that was kind of in beta form last year, and hopefully it's going to roll out with the new report card coming later this month. Again, it's easy sometimes to malign the state for some of their practices, but I think they've done a nice job with the Illinois School Report Card. Okay, so we're going to shift gears and talk about MAP. MAP was adapted last year. It's a computer adaptive test, as we explained in the springtime. It is also aligned to state standards. It is a very large, nationally normed assessment. It uses over 10 million students annually, about 7,000 schools. One of the great things about math, it also does a very good job at measuring growth. So not just achievement, but growth. And again, as we mentioned before, that actionable and timely data. And over time, we're really going to be able to build longitudinal data and reliable and valid data. So that's good, I think, on the individual student basis, providing information on the students. So you can imagine now if students taking that 3 times a year, that's 3 data points. But also, I think over time, what you hear from MAP, as you start to get, 3 years of data, let's say, you start to really get some good programmatic feedback too, as well as some of the things that you're implementing. So we also wanted to look at a couple different ways that we could look at comparing our school to national percentiles. And so MAP uses one methodology. We added an additional methodology, again with the help of Phil, our data analyst. And so when we did this, we actually take the median student, so the average student in a particular grade level, and then we match them to what percentile they would be using MAP's norms. So in essence, if we have a student here, like let's take we have, third grade here, which is a 72nd percentile. That means the average student at Winnetka is performing at the 72nd percentile nationally. Same thing, so if you were to say 6th grade, the average student in the 6th grade class, the median student, that student's right in the middle, is at the 81st percentile. Again, we'll look at another method that MAP uses, the aggregator. I think that's also important. It also becomes important, some of the work we do, for instance, with special ed, we establish thresholds for special ed of where those students are performing on national norms. But we also have our local norms. So where some districts might establish their threshold for special ed at 20%, we might be at 40 or 50% in terms of the norms in our community. Here's what we're seeing in math. One of the things I'd like to point out, that this group, this cohort, again, I think has taken a step up, as you can see. It's more in line with what we're seeing with the other grade cohorts. Grade 3, we're seeing some of that data lagging a bit. There's a couple working theories that we have, and certainly we want to look at all of our instructional practices, but also just to keep in mind, these are little ones, and this is the first time they're taking this type of assessment. So they're still trying to negotiate the technology, a computer, the first time sitting down taking the standardized test. We see our biggest jump and biggest gains, again, up here in 8th grade. So the second way we want to look at it is the way MAP uses. So when MAP produces their published reports, and what you'll probably see from some other districts, so if you were to look at Sunset Ridge or one of the other districts sharing their information, they're actually sharing the data which is provided by MAP. And what it does is it takes our scores from like an aggregate of our students and compares them to other schools. So in essence, you take our bell curve and map it on the national bell curve, and where we fit, depending on what grade, anywhere from the 89th to the 95th or 97th percentile, I should say. In math, okay, we see the same thing in 3rd grade. Again, this is just an area that we're going to want to focus on, our 3rd graders here. We're going to want to kind of see if there's more to the story, if you will. We do see nice jumps, and I should point out this is fall to fall growth, so, or fall, I should say growth, but fall to fall data. So basically the same students in 3rd grade or 4th grade. So just to slow down for a second. So if we look at this, so this class right here, this is their score, 94. This is the score that the 4th grade class has right now. They're at the 94th percentile. When they took the assessment for the first time last year, they were at the 90th percentile. So I think one of the things we see in terms of a nice jump, this again is that 7th grade cohort. I think you're seeing some nice improvement, almost a 10-point gain in percentages, and actually the cohort where we've seen by far the most amount of growth. So that's a positive sign for that group. And what we're seeing is students here in 8th grade, again, that trend of high performance. Okay. NWA actually also provides another document, and I'm actually happy to say there wasn't much to this particular story this time around. They talk about strong relative performance in any grade area. So, for instance, if you're talking about math, is this area better at algebraic? Is this grade better at algebraic thinking? Are they better at geometry? Are they better at mathematical modeling, complex number system? What is it? 7th grade showed that they had a strong relative performance in the area of real and complex number systems. But we didn't really see it anywhere else across all grade levels. In the spring, I think the question came up about geometry. And you know, we had a working theory that said, hey, the kids really aren't immersed in the geometry unit until the end of the year, or towards, I should say, you know, the last quarter. Lo and behold, we're not seeing that as a deficit anymore. So that kind of validates that theory. What it also speaks to, it doesn't say that we're doing everything great. What this really says is that there's an evenness to our curriculum implementation. We don't have any particularly strong or weak areas. And I think we want to be able to kind of do that. That's a sign of a healthy, I think, implementation. So we need to continue to work in all areas. Again, I just want to highlight a couple things about addressing performance areas. We see this area, this particular 7th grade class, the targeted work that was done with this particular group over the last couple of years. In ELA, we see, I should say, in reading, we see continued strong performance from that group. Looking at math, again, a similar trend. We're also going to want to, again, focus on a 3rd to 4th grade transition, which is now going to be our 5th grade class. And we're going to really want to focus on that and disrupt any trends in the 5th grade that may be negative. Okay, and just kind of highlighting some of the key ideas that I just talked about. I also want to kind of highlight that all of this work, again, does get distilled into specific targets and action plans for efforts, which we'll be presenting next month. Some key takeaways on PARC, again, that our student performance builds over time. We're seeing greater reliability and validity with increased participation rates. We're seeing performance in general that is on par or above the township in many areas. Nonetheless, we see an area of important growth is in the exceeds category, particularly in the middle grades. Some key takeaways from MAP. We're now offering MAP 3 times a year. We do see achievement in most grade cohorts at or above the 90th percentile. Grade 3 is one we're going to continue to focus on and see if this is just an anomaly because it's the first time they took it. Nonetheless, we're going to be trying triangulating other data that we have on them. Grade 7, again, we're seeing some market improvement, but again, work still to be done. The third assessment we're going to look at, if you will, and the assessment truly is, it's not assessment in pure form, it is actually a survey that is given to New Trier students, and so it's the current class of 2020, so it's the current sophomores, and they are given this, I think they gave it, they gave this to them at the end of the year, right, almost during finals week, and so that survey data is students self-reporting their experience at New Trier. And so, while it's not hard data in terms of test scores and such, I think it is important feedback from our students and their perceptions and their feelings and their confidence about how they're doing at New Trier. We also have listed some placement level data, which is similar to what we have seen before. And I think by looking at some of that data, I think there is perhaps some growth looking at the different levels. More importantly, I think we're really embarking on some important articulation with the township feeder schools with New Trier, looking at how those placement processes actually work. Maybe pulling the veil back perhaps a little bit and making sure that the placement processes are meaningful and effective, and that we make sure that we're positioning our students for the best degree of success.
Barry, can you just flip back there for 1 second?
Sure
and ask
thing.
a quick question.
Yes.
Did I hear you say that this data was gathered at the end of their freshman year? So these
Correct.
levels are after they have made any shifts they're otherwise going to make, right?
Yeah, so this data is mid-year data, so as they begin their second
So this is
mid-year.
after kids have moved up or down based on performance.
Exactly, so this is, yeah, this is like January,
Okay.
we report this.
Right, and this is not, the placement data and the grade data is presented to the board in February. So this is kind of closing the loop on that with their perception data. So that level placement, the new, we talked about that
Yeah.
and correlated that to some past performance. And so it just kind of closes the loop on their experience.
So some of the things we're seeing, and I think it's you need to really be cautious with some of this data because it obviously is subject to students' perceptions. Nonetheless, I think you want to look for patterns, particularly over time. For the past year, we've seen some really good response in the area of mathematics, where it's almost a 10-point differential in terms of our students feeling prepared or well prepared compared to the other students in the district. With science, as you can see throughout the township, there seems to be a little bit of a decline in the student perception in science. I think that's one that we're going to be looking into a little bit further. I would hate to, again, that you see that we're slightly now below the township average in terms of students' perception around science, although the last few years we've been above. So, and so in fact, the last, every year we've been above. So there hasn't much that has changed that we know in terms of our the preparation specifically around science for this particular cohort. Again, they're sophomores already. The next cohorts coming through will have had new science curriculum, so on and so forth.
Wait, Gray, one more question. Sorry
Yes.
to interrupt you, but I always get confused in the math.
Yes.
This cohort would have had our new math curriculum for. So which of these years would they have? Would any of these grades have had our new math curriculum or any portion of our math curriculum? Because we switched everything over in what 2014.
So they would.
They're on the tail end, right? But Tricia can maybe speak this a little bit better.
They would have been like 6th or 7th grade when we switched over. So it'd be curriculum. So what the chip wasn't as great in the older grades.
So the 2017 kids had how many years of the new math curriculum?
They would have had
3 years, I guess.
Seventh and eighth grade,
2.
which didn't really dramatically change the materials in 7th and 8th grade the way the elementary schools did.
Yeah, so 2 years.
Moving on, in writing, we can see that our students are reporting that, at least for this particular class, not as well prepared in writing, although the past 2 years they were right on par with the district. When it comes to literature, they're consistently, I think, at or slightly above where the township average is. Again, this is one data point for one class. When we start to look at other things in terms of PARC data, not for this class, but for the classes that have followed them, we don't really see any differential between writing and literature. We see them equally strong in different areas. Modern classical languages, again, similarly on par with what we're seeing in the district. Social studies, again, you see that the curve does move around a little bit, but the last 4 years we've been above the township average in terms of social studies as well. Here are 5 key areas, I think, as part of like what that Winnetka experience is, and I think it speaks to who we want to be as a progressive ed, and one really focused on students. It asks students about their experience here at their feeder school. And so, what overall, how was that school experience? We provided with service opportunities. I think there's perhaps been some upgrade efforts in that area since this cohort left. The presence of a helpful adult. I know some of the work that we're doing right now, the school improvement plan really focused on the advisory efforts and building those connections within the school with adults. The amount of homework that we see, our students are slightly above, probably not even a significant number above the township, but that's lower. So it seems like students are saying, and I'm the dad of a high school freshman, and I spent a lot of time as a freshman. This has been the endless refrain of high school students since the beginning of time. We get more homework. But I think a better question is like the quality of homework, the nature of homework, which is really speaking to that. But again, on par with what you're going to see in the district. And from organizational and study skills, our students feel prepared and confident, I think, relative to what we're seeing within the township. So some next steps, again, around our goal of providing meaning, coherence, and major assessment. We're going to continue to embed data analysis in our weekly meetings, through our collaborative learning teams, through our leadership team meetings, through our teacher meetings, so on and so forth. We'll be developing our district plan around goals, actions, and specific measures. For our Institute Day, we're actually adding another learning thread, working with Daniel Ryan in terms of building out learning threads that actually go throughout the year instead of the one-stop shop part of professional learning. So that's going to be on it for power users, if you will. So developing some skilled people who can really do that map analysis to a deeper level within the district and at every school. In June, we'll also be providing our spring assessment report, including park and benchmark analysis provided by Phil. I'm not going to hit all of these. We'll go into more detail next month, but just want you to know, again, I'm just trying to draw the connections between some of the work that we do in establishing our goals, which then will lead to our district improvement plan. So just highlight a couple things that we're going to be doing in the area of ELA, and that work has already begun in earnest, is implementing new word study, scope and sequence, grammar, vocabulary acquisition skills, and also continuing all the work around Teachers College. And so we spent actually 4 days of quality professional learning at the end of the summer with our teachers. We're going to build upon that work. It does help students with the level of analysis and reading, I think, more challenging material. And I think it's also important too, as we started to kind of pull apart some of the data and just working with our ELA facilitators, we're finding that reading isn't just about reading anymore. It's about informational reading. In fact, looking at one of the grade level assessments that we started to pull apart those evidence statements, about 20% of them had to do with technical reading, informational reading, had to do with social studies. So there is more of an interdisciplinary push, which is also reflected in the standards. It's not just about literature anymore. In the area of math, we're going to continue to challenge those high readiness learners. We're working with programs like the Math Forum to find some new opportunities to challenge and meet the needs of high readiness learners. We'll be doing some great growth mindset work. We're very happy to have also a visit from Dr. Joe Bowler of Stanford, who will be visiting us through a fan event and also meeting with our teachers. And we're going to continue to build out that homeschool partnership, which we got a lot of good feedback from our parents. And hey, we need help in working with our students. And we know as educators and as parents, there's no greater advocate for learning than the parent. So helping the parent with those processes and sharing information and tools to help the parent. Oh, and I just want to include one other piece of and this is also the important work of math facilities, math interventionists. Thanks to some of the changes we've done with staffing, we're able to provide full-time interventionists, particular at the K2 level, but also now we have Skokie as well. We're going to continue to do that work, and it really helps the math facilitators focus on high-level instruction, building that high-quality learning experiences, problem solving, and bringing that. And that was a specific recommendation that actually came out of the math program evaluation and is now an official recommendation from National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. Next steps for New Trier, Washburn will continue to do their good work around data and look at this, and they've already been starting. I know they already started looking at this today and speculating on some of the ideas. But I think some of the best conversations when they have an opportunity to actually visit with New Trier teachers and build out those conversations. We're actually having some great conversations too across different curriculum directors. In fact, I'm meeting tomorrow morning. What we're finding, for instance, some of the examples of things we're going to be working on. Some of the other districts are adopting MAP for the first time this year, so we're going to be sharing ideas around MAP. Some of them are adopting Teachers College. We've been doing that. We'll be discussing some of our ELA practices. We actually have a literacy team that's kind of a subdivision of that, so it's some really important work. We're also looking at some of the New Trier math programs that are offered for our students and trying to build that kind of articulation with the township.
Sorry, Greg, another question.
Yes.
How many of New Trier feeder schools right now are using MAP? And then with the two, so starting next year, how many of them
I was trying to calculate it in my head. I'll know better tomorrow morning, but I want to say all or almost all. So Trish, do you have any?
It'll be all.
It's
It'll be all
yeah.
after this.
After this.
Well,
this
MAP
year.
started this year.
Okay,
Yeah,
so it's all, so everyone's in now.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, just to go back to our timeline, here's kind of where we're at right now. We've been able to share the data with our different groups and now with our school board and community. We'll be working with our teams to develop our district improvement plan for next month. And looking forward to sharing that information with you.
Barry, I've got a couple of questions. I think we're probably going to get more into the data here in a little bit, but before we do that, just some general questions. The 7th grade cohort, maybe you guys can answer this a little bit. How are we making sure that the work that was being done at Skokie is continuing on? How are we handling that transition?
So we have some intervention classes currently in math, reading, and writing. And based on recommendations from some of the Skokie staff and some students who needed that intervention, we started day one with those students in those 3 different intervention classes, which our math facilitator and our reading specialist teach those classes.
Okay. So we're just kind of keeping an eye on that particular group. And then one thing struck me about the New Trier perception data. I was looking at the science, how people perceive their, how adequate their training was for science.
Yes.
And if you look at every school is, the line's kind of like this.
Right. Yeah.
Which is a little worrisome.
Right. It's over 20 points over the course.
Yeah,
of
and
the
I don't. So I'm wondering, when we see trends like that, are the New Trier people, or do we talk to them and say, hey, what the heck's going on? Is our curriculum, not lined up with what they're, needing kids to know, or what? I don't understand that.
Right.
There's several layers of that.
Okay.
One, obviously, Paul and I talk a lot. Paul's going to be here next month just to talk to us and to parents in general about that. But more importantly, Lori Worth, their transition coordinator, meets with all of our 8th grade teachers to talk about transition in general. And yes, our departments meet with the departments from there as well. One of the cleanest ones probably at this point is the English articulation department, which is why when you saw the writing thing, it intrigued everyone, because it was one of the questions asked this year. They've already met representatives from each of the township schools, from the language departments, administration, and the department chair at New Trier all sit down together, and they already met this year. One of the questions was, hey, are you guys seeing anything? And the answer was, no, there are no concerns. So when we see that from their kids' perception, it's intriguing to us, because their readiness is important to us. So therefore, obviously, their perception of their readiness is important to us. But New Trier also shares at semester the kids' grades. So we know that that same group that reported that as their readiness was also the group that had the highest percentage of kids getting A's of the township schools. So we want to tease out, we don't necessarily understand why some of those differences are there. The difference between the perception data and the MAP and PARC, and don't let me ramble on through this too long, is that with the MAP and PARC, and MAP especially now, we have one cohort we can look at several time data points over the course of the year. With the New Trier perception data, we have, it's a one-time shot at the end of their freshman year. And so to even try to compare cohorts is to say the least difficult to do. But since we do like the data and we're concerned, we do ask those questions still. So I know that the social studies teachers today were asking the same question. While we are still, our kids are reporting feeling more prepared than the other township schools. they've noticed that it's still less than it had been, so they're curious as to why, so they want to have some conversations with Trier about that as well.
Science in particular, the science department and I met yesterday, and the township, we notice, is doing it. One of the thoughts the science teachers, and they do talk to the science freshman coordinator every year and get feedback actually on a teacher-by-teacher basis of how their kids are doing, and it increase the number of lab reports. They have a whole list of things that they get feedback from the Trier. But an important thought for them was that us and all of the other feeder schools, when we adopted Common Core, moved to more of an inquiry approach in science, and we're integrating all the different disciplines together. And at New Trier, they still are very, now you're in biology, now you're in physics. But with our inquiry approach, it's not looking at the scientific method quite subject by subject, it's more integrated, and all the feeder schools are doing that with the adoption of Common Core.
And what we're seeing though, as far as their performance, it is still high. We're seeing though, at sometimes the kids and outputs reporting that, golly, I'm not feeling it, and we're beginning to wonder in some cases, is it a difference of instructional style? Because the achievement is still high and remains high.
You could put the writing up, actually, I can go back to that slide, because that's meaningful.
Which one, the science one?
Writing.
Writing.
The writing one stands out. So I agree that they're all going down. The writing one is that one hurt. Like, that's meaningful. It's strange.
Is there
And we are the top. I get we're the top performer in grades. I'm just wondering, is there expectations are maybe too high of the kid? I don't know.
Yeah, I think I definitely think that that's something that we need to pay attention to. I think at the same time, I think we need to be really careful. We're looking at 185 students that we've sampled, and we know that the students are performing relatively well compared to their peers in writing. We have not seen this trend in the past few cohorts, so you need to be careful about, I think, some of those things that are happening. More importantly, where are our students? Like we see in 7th grade and 8th grade, are we seeing preparedness levels lower in writing at this particular time? So the bottom line is we're not seeing it in other areas right now. Certainly if we see this again, it's a big problem. We also give our own writing cornerstone assessments. So we only have our own internal assessments. And when we talk to our people, I think we've got Jen Feig in here, who's our we don't see, that same thing being mirrored. Now, I don't know if there was anything, is there also anything particularly unique to this cohort? And so I've talked to Dave, I wasn't here when this cohort was, was that a group that perhaps didn't write as well as some of the other cohorts? And I think that the jury is still out on that.
My point on that is actually not that because they're clearly good writers, because the grades show that.
Right.
There may be, I'm wondering if we told them, hey, by the way, New Trier is easy at writing. You guys are going to be the superstars there. And they got there, and it was harder.
Yeah.
The only thing is just the number that would be the one thing of all the data that we saw. Look, the data's, I'm the first person to point at this data for 7 years. But of all the ones, the data is really good. This one is the one I would probably just wonder about sort of.
Is there a way to see this on the PARC and the ELA? Can you break out the reading and the writing so that you can start to see? Is there a trend that's happening on the writing that we can see that's normative, that is longitudinal? So that
Right. So this particular, again, when we look at this particular cohort, they took PARC the first year, and that data is pretty dubious because I think 30% of them took the actual assessment. So we really can't look back on this particular group. I think going forward, we certainly could and probably will want to.
Well, I'm just saying in our current.
Yeah, so in our current stats, so if we look side by side and you look at the performance bands of our writing and literature, like different domains, you don't see like a difference. Like you don't see that the writing is weak in comparison to the reading.
I asked Lori, and I'll say this, she said she's going to respond to it with an answer tomorrow. She said, we know that grade-wise, they outperform the others. We know that on the assessments, they're just as strong. And so on the one hand, while not only myself, but the other principals in the township question some of the validity of this type of data, you can't look at that and not still have a question. So what I'd like to do, and I told Lori, I'd like next time we visit there to have the articulation meeting, I'd like to sit down with you with our kids and actually hear from them and express some of the same things. And not just at the end of a school year, but almost around this time period. What's happening, what's the shift been like for you, and listen directly to them about questions such as this.
But I think Scott's thought is a good one. This is something, if we can break that out with our map, not PARC, I don't think PARC is all that helpful, but particularly with MAP,
keeping an eye on the writing separate from the reading, if we're able to do that, is something we should be looking at. Do we?
Yeah,
So
We don't
Matt
do
doesn't
writing
have
from
writing?
that.
But we do
Matt-
have our own writing assessment.
We have our own writing cornerstone assessments.
The park has writing? Which, do we? don't
Park
have
has writing, yeah, so we can actually compare the park. The park is probably the better instrument to use that, and looking at our writing cornerstone assessments are also really important. I do love David's, idea of just actually working with those students. In terms of, other pieces, in terms of the writing, again, I don't want to diminish this, but it is one particular data point. There's also another level, right? And this is where it gets, I think, even more interesting, because you also don't, when you look at some of this data, some of the worst things you can do is start to chase red herrings. So it's a cost of opportunity, you're looking at everything. So we've made a number of shifts with our curriculum right now, where we're teaching writing through the Teachers College writing process. We believe it's a writing process that is much deeper, it's more reflective, higher levels of critical thinking, better conferring, better discussing. When students go to high school, whether it's New Trier or other high schools, it's not unusual for them to have a more traditional experience in terms of writing. So I think that one is not exclusive to the other. I think, again, just working with our ELA facilitators and making sure that we're able to bridge that gap.
Right. I think we heard two things. Just let's investigate this from a career perspective, and with our students, just see if we have any more information to help understand this. And then can we just verify the performance, even though it's a different group of kids? Do we see anything like this in performance showing up? So we have some early validation that we don't, but the request is just to look at that more deeply. So I think that's just a request, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and I think that's
Just keep an eye
very
on it.
Yeah,
reasonable.
so I think that's okay.
It's the opposite of the last time, because we did have a writing issue a number of years ago, but the perception was that, hey, we were fine, but the grades weren't great. Allison's
This is a better problem.
Yeah.
Can I ask a separate question, please? I'm following up on Kristen's comment, which is the 7th grade cohort, it looks like, and I'm a lot less worried about test scores in 3rd grade than I am in 8th grade. So I just want to frame it that way. You guys sound like you're doing a lot of good things on the 7th graders. Is there anything more that you need to help that group of kids learn the best they can?
And just to flesh that out, can someone, I assume, what is going on? Why is this cohort consistently performing? Do we have more students who are with IEPs perhaps? What's been the sort of conclusions as to why we have this one group that has consistently struggled despite, well, they're getting better, where we've intervened, but I've never really got a grasp on what's going on.
So we've done analysis like that of any sort of higher higher needs with IEP goals, and you don't see this sort of thing. I don't know if we're going to talk about this.
Go ahead.
No, so it isn't such as a pinpoint of here's a specific characteristic where their percentage of needs are X, Y, Z. It's a phenomenon that Barry talked about, that sometimes you have a group of kids that just score discrepantly. Instead of just accepting it, I think is the message. We've tried to really customize the support based on what's working or what's not. And so Skokie actually tried a few different things when the kids were in 5th and 6th grade until they saw some of the results. If you recall, they came back with some pretty strong results. They piloted an interventionist for math for the first time at Skokie because of this group and changed some scheduling parameters where students prior to this were pulled out of the fine arts in order to receive interventions, and we were getting parents refusing interventions because they didn't want their kids out of fine arts, for instance, which makes a lot of sense. So they made some changes to try to do that. And we start to saw some of the benchmarking, progress monitoring data for those start to show improvement. And so with that, then we were able to better customize, and that's why it was encouraging. We saw the improvement in some of these interventions start to show up earlier for ELA related English language arts than we did math. And now that's why it was so good. If you recall, we were a little worried. The board talked about this in June about some of the math data, which was from winter, don't forget, not June, of this group in 6th grade. And so now to see this group's fall math data have such an increase in performance was also a good indication that we've been able to kind of calibrate the support. Some, they just need different types of support along the way to tell them their needs.
The question I have, and it's a correlation question, is we're seeing movement and mobility on map, right? That's where we're seeing the growth in in our testing up to this point in time from an assessment standpoint.
And the progress monitoring data.
Should we assume then that we're going to see that that's going to translate to a better park assessment, just from a correlation standpoint?
You could, I know you asked about the correlation before, the correlation between MAP and park. Phil?
I mean,
that's
these
changed.
assessments, they don't correlate as strongly as you might think. I mean, I've seen correlations like below 0.6, which is kind of low. I mean, you think that there would be high, but probably, intuitively to me, they're not as high as I think they would be, frankly. So these correlations are not super strong. And they all the vendors do them because they do these checks against other things. So MAP probably has the correlations for many states. I'm sure they have it for Illinois, and it's, in my experience when I've seen them, they're not super high. 0.5, 0.6, that's about as high as they get.
My challenge to you guys is I'm not smart enough to know what the metric to measure is. If it's park in the spring or MAP in the fall, that's what you guys do. What else do you need? You have 15 months before they go to New Truro of teaching them. Is there something else that is needed that the board needs to help
At this point, first of all, since it's Principals Month, I will say this. The work that Kelly did with these guys at finding interventions and helping to identify kids and those issues has been incredible, and that's why they've been able to make some of the strides they made. So thank you. And the fact that she has helped us and her teachers have worked with us on the front end in identifying some of those needs and concerns. We've been able to put some of those interventions in place as they start. So at this point, we do believe we have those interventions in place, and the teachers are very much aware of this issue and of these kids. As we look at more assessments as we move forward, we might say, you know what, maybe we need to tweak this or that, but right now we believe that because of the advanced knowledge and the work done, and because of what we have in place, we feel pretty confident we are doing what we can right now, but we will continue to take a look at it as well.
We also, after this first round of MAP, did data dives where each of our teachers looked at their specific students' data and identified students that may have performed a little lower than they hoped for, and we're optimistic that in the next round of MAP, that's going to give us even more information to be able to better help them, which will be in January.
And maybe, yeah, this is the message that we want to take away, which the board has followed through on every time. As I mentioned, we invested staffing and programmatic support for these children over the last few years. When we come to the board and ask for that support, you've given it and we've justified it. So I think what you're trying to say too is the board will continue to invest in this
Well,
cohort.
I'm only one, but we
Yeah.
have 15 months before they go to New Truro.
Yeah.
I mean, let's
Yeah.
get it right.
Just as much as we can, yeah.
Yep.
Can I ask a question? So the one, I won't really call it a trend, but the one area I'm seeing kind of consistently show up is where we are falling a little behind with our highest level achievers. So if I read the data correctly, in grades 7 and 8 in the ELA, our exceeds category was above the district average, but the rest were below. In math, I think we were less than all of them. Now, our overall point, we had more in sort of the doing very well category,
Right,
but
right.
that highest category, and math, we were below all the others. Not always super significantly, but to some extent. And similarly, our placement for level 4 classes, we were, I think, 16.7%, whereas the district average was 20.8. Again, it's not a huge number, and I recognize I'd be interested what Phil says that actually represents from a number of kids' perspective. And I know parents decide not to put their kids in all level 4s and to bring them down and all that. So I get it's not exact, but I'm sort of seeing something here that I'd like to have the board think about. I don't know, maybe I'm the only one. Why is that? I think our overall scores are looking very good, and we are clearly preparing our kids well, but that group, that highest level of achievers, what can we be doing differently? Why are we seeing that discrepancy kind of consistently throughout all the data?
So I don't know if Phil wants to say anything in terms of just the placement level distribution. I think the comment had to do with like how significant are those differences?
I won't have all the data points for all of the feeder schools for another few weeks, but I've always been suspicious or cautious about bins because they're a line, and you could fall far below or far above the line, right? So I don't really know exactly where you guys are compared to the other districts. I'll know more when we see that. We really haven't, I haven't really looked at it in terms of looking at kids at one side of the distribution, which might be helpful. But the meet and exceeds, I really don't know where the other districts fall. We just have the numbers for each district, meet and exceeds, and, you know, it's limiting, but we'll have more soon, so.
No, I know we don't have it per school, and I don't need to see that, but if you're just looking at district averages, you can see that, you know, grade 8 is 22 to 14, 18 to 14, 15 to 7, 18 to 12, 16 to 7, 31 to 27. They're not, in some cases, they're very close, but I just...
Is that an indicator of something else?
Isn't it? I mean, if you're seeing it consistently throughout, and even in a small amount, it's, to me, you start to say, okay, well, wait a minute, there it is again.
So that's where I think too, we started to in June. We didn't resurrect that data for this presentation, but you saw the MAP growth data and achievement data by quartile as well. So that's where you're going to see the district improvement plan and some of the points to that. And if you recall, we were focusing, we saw strong growth at 7th and 8th grade in, I'll focus on math, in those 4 quartiles even, I think, we're all green, we color coded them. And 3rd grade's a little stronger, but we really wanted to focus, and we saw this here, on that middle groups, the 4, 5, and 6. So when we look to put data on top of data to really find out where we should put our attention, because we do this will go up in time, but over time, you know, you do see kind of that strong performance happen, and where you end overall, as you noted, there's strong performance compared as a total of meets and exceeds. So now we want to use and set the goals that help us with the MAP data that we saw noted in June, where we do see some of, I don't know how the strong correlation is to Scott's question, but we do see some of the patterns start to come together. When you see the patterns, when you want to really
Well, we talked about this, and I'll just share with what I mentioned to Tricia. The one piece that isn't here, and she explained why, and I get it, is the MAP. How many kids met their RIT? How many kids actually grew, as opposed to stayed the same or went down? And that, she said, that's a spring to spring, fall to spring analysis, not a spring to fall, because there's a dip in the fall, and I totally get that. But to me, that's going to be kind of important, because I want, and I'd like that by quartile, because I want to make sure we're not just overall growing, but that each quartile is actually growing.
And that's what we did in June for you. We broke that down by quartile, because that was sensitive and important. And so, and that's where we want to make sure when we do see those patterns kind of emerge, that we have an attention to that and make note of that and change practices and change ways, and we are doing some of that.
You know, absolutely. We're not shying away from, I think we're unique in the district in terms of actually breaking it up by quartiles. I don't think we would be able to do that again without Phil. As Phil, here's what we want to be able to do. Phil made it happen to really, you know, focus on that. You know, at the same time, again, it's important to see this in the context of what's going on in terms of the classrooms. And sometimes, and I think there's certainly areas where we're going to say we need additional challenge. We're going to be introducing more complex problem solving. We really need to meet the needs of higher readiness learners. That's something we're on our own. And I think I don't know if that's happened before here. We're certainly going to do that. At the same time, there are also warranted times where depth of knowledge is more important than accelerating. So some would argue, and many of our teachers who are expert teachers would say, you know, sometimes we go slow to go fast. We build a strong base of mathematics. So in other ways, instead of just learning how to solve one problem quickly using one single algorithm so you can score high on a test, our students actually learn multiple ways of solving that problem and develop more grit around problem solving. So it's probably a combination of factors, but we're certainly going to be focusing on, and again, it's a specific goal of ours, it's a specific goal to meet the needs of high readiness learners.
Well, I know you talked about some of the things you're doing towards that end, there at the end. So, you know, I think just like the writing, let's keep an eye on that and monitor that and make special efforts to measure the progress we're making there.
Absolutely, that's an excellent point. Yeah.
I think one thing that'd be really helpful, and I thank you so much for putting together the targeted improvement areas, because I think that's a great kind of beachfront for us to, as the board, to kind of really get a sense of what you're focusing on. It'd be helpful for, at least for me, from a perspective, is to see in your district improvement plans how that's going to tie, like what we can expect to see in MAP assessments or in the data assessments going forward, just from a directional standpoint, how your tactics and strategies that we're going to deploy for our students are going to translate to what we can see from the data points, so that we know what's working and what's not. Does that make sense?
No, that's a solid recommendation. Yeah, it does.
We introduced that. That was a big ask of the board from earlier. Last year's first district improvement plan. There was not only just the metrics we're going to use, or just the tool, we're going to use MAP data. It actually said, here's what we'd like to see. Here's the target we're trying to shoot for.
I think, again, I'm not going to be on this board forever. I don't think. There is. I think, and I always talk about the Nutrier numbers because it's over a much longer period, right? On a given day, a kid can come in and take a PARCC test or a MAP test and I do think the community tends to like data. That's one of the reasons, again, it's changed a lot in 7 years. I think we've done a very good job of talking about the data. I think a couple of things on the Nutrier numbers, we tend to place fewer kids in the level 4s. We talked about that years ago. We had an in-depth look, and sometimes parents opt to put their kids in. Fewer Winnetka people do that, we felt. But like even then, we still place less. That would be something to look at. That's interesting. Grades, we tended to do well. Our teachers are good. They prep the kids, and the survey tells us that and has for years. So they're doing a good job. The hard part is now translating that, because as a parent of a 7th or 8th grader, I look at that survey and I'm like, wow, I'm really happy my kids go to District 36. They are well prepared for high school. I'm really getting a good value here. Happy to live here. My neighbors are, everybody should be happy. We're producing a great product. The problem is, when I was a parent of a 3rd grader, it's hard to hear about Nutrier satisfaction surveys. And so tying that back through MAP or PARCC, that is, it's not an easy problem to solve, but that would be something you should look at, together. Because saying, hey, look, the kids who do this well in MAP or on PARCC, I don't know the exact thing, will tend to do this. This tends to correlate well at Nutrier.
Right.
Because that's what parents really care about. Is my kid prepared for high school?
As a parent of 4 Nutrier kids, yes, I agree. And the problem is, Nutrier's not exactly forthcoming with this kind of data, really. They're protective of it. So these are the kind of things that are of great interest to me. There's concerns they have, obviously, for a whole bunch of reasons. So
Right, I just clarify, because I think we're talking on 2 different things. I think what you're saying, let me make sure, is we have this freshmen this year, right, who are going to be taking the survey at the end of this year, and we're going to get their grades. I think what you're saying, Matt, is let's find out how they performed as 3rd graders in this district, and let's show their performance
Absolutely.
through the data we have, and just snapshot it through that lens.
Because you want to be able to tell the parent of the 3rd grader
The
that
full
here's
story.
where they're just, this
Here's
is our
the trajectory.
process. We're progressive. Because this gets into that whole philosophy conversation. We're a progressive district. We're teaching stacked math. We're teaching U of C, whatever. I've been doing this a long time. That tends to be, and if we could lay out that path through data, it just helps a ton. And
Rather than just an anecdotal.
We have a good story to tell.
And here's a snapshot of a group of students who
Absolutely.
performed well at Nutrier and how they looked as 3rd graders versus now, and you can see this repeat over and over.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a parent.
Cohorts too. Meaning so that it's not subjective. You can look and see it's
Right.
normative across all of your cohorts.
So one cohort could pick the highest performing, someone else could pick the current group, except.
I mean, I think it's important for a parent of younger kids to understand that 3rd grade MAP score and PARCC score is not determinative of their placement at Nutrier. And I think the district does a pretty good job preparing more for test results later as it goes on, but not worrying as much about them. I mean, it helps the teachers figure out how to teach earlier, but it is not, in my mind, determinative. My child's not fixed forever in their life by how they did in 3rd grade math. But it is worrying when that's your oldest child. And I think we just need to help.
So, with data.
Show with data how that works. And I think that we have a good record of those scores move up compared to other towns as they feed over years. Now, some years we have cohorts, in which case then the board has to say, what do we need to do to adjust to help the cohort?
Well, with that in mind, I think it's slide 26, right? It's the 7th grade slide, but it highlights the challenges of the cohorts behind the 7th grade math. So what we've learned, I guess the question is, if I'm a parent, right, how do I hold those data points, right? Not that one. It's towards
the one where you
Lance, you would move to slide 27.
26.
26.
That's the one where it says performance 7th grade.
It's the 7th grade, but I'm looking at the cohorts behind it.
It's a nice, yeah.
It shows all of them.
Right.
Thank you.
Come on.
Yeah, that one, right? So, if I'm a parent, how would I hold, right, the work that might need to be done with the current 6th graders and the current 5th graders, knowing what we know about how intervention potentially helps that 7th grade cohort?
Right, so you're talking about the current 5th grade group,
Current
right?
5th grade, current 5th grade, current 6th grade. I know it's hard to look
Current
because you got a bunch of
7th
years.
grade.
Sorry.
5th grade,
No,
7th
it's current 5th grade and current 6th grade, if I read the data correctly.
Park result is ending 6 is now this year's 7th grade, right?
Right, but the far left, right, so grade 3 to 4.
Yeah.
That's current 5th graders.
Correct.
Correct.
For Park. Yes.
Right, and then you've got your current 6th graders right next to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
For
And your point is they've dropped?
Yes.
Is it?
Right, and as a parent, right, so you say, well, wait a
Right.
second,
Going the wrong way.
should we be concerned about that? And if so, what have we learned with how we've treated that 7th grade cohort that we can apply quickly to some effect for those? And look, I realize this is sort of a high-class problem, particularly with the math, right? So, wow, 93rd to 90th, that's a high-class problem. But nevertheless, these are questions parents ask.
And it's valuable, and the question too is that a significant
Right.
difference, right? So what's noise versus what's, and we've talked about that for years, right? What's noise versus real? So we did say that current 4th grade, or 5th grader, who saw strong 3rd grade performance, and saw saw not only in Park, but some questions too. Again, this is all relative, because this is not like, right, the other group, and saw some of that in MAP too when it came to their growth. They were the only cohort that had less than half of their quartiles meet their growth target too, right? So that's where that transitions. We talked about this at our ed team meeting last week, and before I could even finish the sentence, our elementary principals and Kelly chimed in and said, we've already talked about that in the spring. Here's what we've done. We've already aligned them up. We don't see this. We'll see how this. What's nice about MAP, not 3 times a year, is we're going to get real-time data in a few months to, again, customize this in a more tailored way. So I would say where we are now is we were honest. This didn't surprise us. It has not been. The 3rd grade performance is strong. 4th grade, we saw both MAP and Park. They're really spend some attention here. They're doing that, and now we're going to be able to come back in winter. Because fall doesn't give us any time to respond to that. So we'll come back in winter, and we should see that improvement. And if we don't, then Kelly and Michelle and everybody else on the Skokie team are going to continue to do what they need to. But I want to be careful, because that, which I hear you saying too, and now your head, this sort of shift is not as significant or as attention worthy as a shift as that other cohort came in. But it's definitely worth the time and energy and planning. Does that help answer what you're saying?
Yeah, and to me, it's more if you think about the parent community, we've shown that if we do intervene, and we have some track record here, that we can focus on this, and if we need to, put some things in place that will bend the curve.
I believe, so if teachers look at the MAP scores and then they look at how their students did, and then they can pull out themes that might need intervention, do the teachers then contact the parents and say, I looked at your child's MAP data and it looks like so-and-so could use some extra reading intervention? Or, is that communicated when the teachers drill down and look at the students' MAP data where there might be areas of concern, or the opposite, areas of high
Ellie, do you
performance?
want to take this one?
Sure. They do. That's something that we do both in the late spring, so when we're transitioning 4th to 5th grade, and then something we do again in the fall when they take the test. But we never look at the MAP score alone as a qualifier for intervention. So we
With the
try
other assessments that the teachers do throughout the whole year.
Right, we try to cross-check to make sure that there's a trend there that shows there's a need for support. I would say with the way that our grade levels are configured, being that 5th and 6th grade has been the first place where we've had the full-time math intervention to start. Now this year, obviously that's changed with the addition of the elementaries. Our kind of mantra has been, don't wait. If you have even 2 pieces of data that show that this child needs the intervention, we have them for 2 years. There's no need to prolong that. So kind of our attitude has been get the help as soon as possible. Also because our schedule now makes it so that we have this skills period in place where they're not forfeiting another educational experience in order to get the support. Which really, if you kind of look at how kids respond to intervention, if they're in a place where they're able to recognize that the support is helpful and going to help them graduate back into class with a stronger foundation, they're going to respond to that intervention much more strongly than if you punish them by taking art or music away, something they love, to get more of a subject that they're already feeling less confident in. So it's a two-pronged approach of really analyzing data and making sure that you're getting kids into that intervention as quickly as you possibly can so that you start to see that change.
Kelly, is that going sort of beyond the intervention? I mean, I think there's different categories. There's the identifying a need for support, and then there's just identifying a lack of growth. So maybe, again, it's among the higher performers, but where you don't see the growth you would have expected from a particular child. They're not necessarily needing support, and they're not struggling, but they didn't grow as you would have expected them to do in whatever period of time you're measuring.
Right.
Are the teachers also looking at that and figuring out, so-and-so their reading score went down 5 points. Why is that?
Right.
They're still fine, but they're not growing.
Right.
Are they looking at that kind of thing?
Yeah.
The principals are too, yes.
Yeah, and yeah, well, it's not only true at Skokie, but I think one of the nice features about MAP is that it offers the data to the teachers in a variety of different presentations. So the report that we share with parents is a pretty reader-friendly report that kind of shows, a longitudinal projection of a child's growth over time, over the times that they've participated in the test. From the teacher perspective, we're able to really kind of drill down and look at not only the quality of the questions that they participated in and which areas were more difficult for them, but then also look at a full class profile and look at everything from growth and achievement to just growth or just achievement. So that particular report gives us this full-scale picture of showing kids that are low in growth and achievement or kids that are achieving very, very high but aren't necessarily growing, they're stagnating. So that gives us that full spectrum of kids that are needing high levels of support to kids who we need to be pushing a little bit more. And that lends itself to some nice conversations in our grade level meetings. This is the first year that we've really been able to look at that because now we have the fall to fall. And that led to some really interesting conversation in our team meetings to really look at, does this profile match your interpretation of things as a teacher and what you're doing in the classroom? Is there anybody that's an outlier that we really need to have a conversation about that we may not have otherwise?
So I think too, like the agility that you just heard, it's been built over time. So we have consistent curriculum, we refined our assessment plan to have real-time data to help make these decisions. We helped invest in professional learning for our staff to use this in a helpful way. And then we invested in both interventionists, but also we're looking at that enrichment piece of this too to make sure we have that continuum so that we're at a point now, which is, I think we should recognize, where we can say, as soon as you have that information, we're able to implement support pretty quickly. And so we'll continue to refine that and use that but I think, that's a high standard that we want to meet as a district to be able to have that level of attention to each individual student, the ability to meet their needs.
I just wanted to put a question out to my fellow board members. So as you guys saw in the same presentation, everyone's first priority in this Future Ready District 36 is educational programming. And I want us, there's been all kinds of talk in the community for several years now on the board about the data, what the data says, how are our schools, how is our educational programming stacking up. I mean, to me, this is the time to really, as a board, look at this, figure out what we think the weaknesses are, and come to some conclusions as to what our starting point is. Because as we're getting ready to talk to this district about potentially updating our schools and all of that, I think we need to have our story clear, not our story, we need to be clear as a board as to what we think we need. If it's not already here in this data, what other data needs to be seen by us, and where we think we are from an educational, whether our programming is providing the education to our kids that it needs. And if it isn't, what those weaknesses are. And we've already talked about some of them tonight. But I just think having a clear understanding amongst ourselves that we can also share with community members that come to meetings and that talk to us about it as to, hey, here's what we saw, here's what the data shows us, here's where we see our weaknesses are, and as we implement Future Ready 36, this is what we're going to be doing with educational programming if we think there are any. And I know that's a lot of goals, But I'd really like to get everybody's view tonight of, have you seen everything you need to see? You know, what is the data saying to you generally? Is there any big glaring problem that we should be focusing on that we haven't discussed? Because to me, it's time. It's time to be on the same page. So I'm just throwing that out there. You've kind of heard from me tonight. You know what my issues are. Otherwise, I think it's pretty much what it says it is. It just, to me, seems pretty good. But Kristen, I should have let you raise that.
No, I mean, I was going to ask the same question. You know, test scores is obviously, we spend a lot of time on it. I feel like we've analyzed it from every which way to Sunday, but I think I agree with you. I mean, I think we ought to have a really honest conversation here and see if people want to see more data. They don't feel like we're addressing what the weaknesses are, if they see weaknesses that haven't been addressed, and just get a sense from people around the table as to how we feel about, you know, how we're going and what our academic programming is looking like. So I think that's a great idea if we could get people to kind of chime in. Anybody's got any thoughts?
I always have a thought on this, which is that I always go back to, I think our parents won't give a darn if we do great on MAP and we do great on Park and our grades at New Trier are not good. That's what the parents care about. Are our kids prepared for high school? Because that's our job. We deliver them to New Trier after 8th grade. So I think that tends to be I think the thing that we have done in the last 7 years, and I'll give Thomas some credit for it, but when I first came on the board after Mary and Mark and Ken, was we have figured out a way to make the district unified. It's a team. It's a collective. And I think I would love to see not us as a board, but I'd like to see Tricia and the principals, given it's Principals Month, to write the narrative. This is we're going to deliver. Your kids are going to do as well as they can at New Trier, and we're going to prepare them for that. And you start, but it's not at Hubbard Woods we teach this curriculum, and we teach this curriculum, and don't worry, it'll all work out. Because our parents are more demanding. That is the one thing I would like to see as a board member, is the narrative be consistent. I know it is already. It's really our ability to get that story out.
But Matt, can you answer that in your own mind? I mean, don't mean to push you, but do you think our kids are prepared for New Trier? Is what you have seen answering that question for you?
I'm certain, because I look at the grades and I look at the preparation. Our kids are as well, if not better prepared than every other district or than the other districts. So that shows up in the data. I wouldn't move to another feeder district if I was, look, because the data doesn't say that. Our kids are well prepared, at least as well as the other districts. I did worry. I'm on the board because as a third grade, when I had a third grader, this is years and years ago, the ISAT said in 5th grade, we didn't do very well. That was the one piece of data. And so in the absence of having a consistent narrative, the parents, get worked up because there's data that comes out that says, hey, by the way, looks like we're not teaching in 5th grade. Your point, absolutely. Somebody's going to look at that data and say, my goodness, last year the 6th grade teachers took the year off. Because they won't understand the context of the story, which is that, hey, that group has struggled since 3rd grade. We understand that. We're on top of it. We're going to deliver your kids in as well prepared as anybody could hope for to their first year in New Trier. That would be the thing that we should do a better job of actually telling that story.
The board supported that too, yeah.
Right, but if you look at sometimes you go back and you look at at what's on our website. We don't actually say, we have a long rambling about the district, but we don't actually say what we believe and why we believe it. It's a long thing, but we talk about it, but to distill it, I think Matt's exactly right. Distilling it into a relatively short, we have a strategic vision, we believe in whole child, all that is good, then why? And we prepare kids well. I would take slight disagreement. I think we underperformed slightly on the feeders, on that slightly in the exceeds category over some number of years. That's a place to work and improve. right? But I think you can admit we're doing really well and we have a couple things to improve on, would be my personal opinion. But I do think we need to better explaining the transition. I wouldn't want us to give up Immigration Day to have a better score in 4th grade. Because I think it doesn't matter as to how, it does matter. Immigration Day is more important to how you do it in New Trier than 4th grade math score. But to explain that in short form.
Scott, I know you look at data. What do you think?
Scott, you got the ear.
I don't like the data.
I would say that I would say within this performance, I think there is some great leading indicators of how I think the district is performing. I think where, from a data standpoint, I like your suggestion is being able to look at data in different longitudinal ways to be able to see beyond just a subset of information. You know, part of the reason why I'm asking the correlation question that I asked is because I even look at this slide right now that we have up, is there's kind of just in the visualization, there's an inherent kind of narrative that we're telling that there may be a correlation between what we're seeing relative to Park and relative to MAP. So if we're gonna present the data in a way that shows that there may be an inherent correlation by that, I think it's intuitive to ask the question, is there a correlation between them? And so where I start to ask the question is like, okay, I see great growth on my map in the fall. Well, I want to go back and look, what was my growth in math in the spring to see, like, does it tell the same story? Because then these two graphs really don't mean that much to me comparative next to each other. So what's hard for me when I look at the data is that I have to kind of start to parse the data out, remove it away from, I got to look at it in the Park, and what does the Park mean? What does it mean from an achievement standpoint? What does the map mean? What does that mean from a growth and achievement standpoint? What's the triangulated kind of way that we're trying to do it? And to be honest, as a new board member, I'm still wrapping my head around it. And I'm still trying to understand exactly how I can use the data to help and make sure that the district is performing according to, at least where I feel anecdotally from people that are coming to me, that there's different interpretations from what they see and what they're hearing. So I think that's where I'm trying to kind of marry all of the different disparate data points that I'm getting as a board member, a community member, as a parent, and trying to make sense of it all. So I think directionally, I think there's great stuff to see here. How does that tell the narrative? I still don't know the answer to that yet. And I think that's, each time I see the data, I get more informed about it and I get better understanding of how I think it can be used from a district perspective.
Is there another way of presenting the data, or is there other pieces that would help make that picture clearer for all of us? If there's another story to be told here, we probably all would like to hear it. But I don't know how else to tell the story. I mean, I wouldn't know what else to ask for, I guess is what I'm saying. To me, this tells a story that's pretty clear, but I don't know what else to look for. So is there pieces of information you can think of that would be helpful to get a fuller understanding of the narrative that others might see here?
I do like the suggestion that you have is trying to look back and look to see what that path looks like, because I think it starts to tie in, I think, a lot of the assessment methodology that we've put in.
So we, just to be clear, because we're going to try to connect data that was different, because we changed some data. So the state changed its assessment and we changed our assessment, right? So we need to overcome that somehow without looking like we're skewing this in there. That's my concern, because when you have one assessment like ISAT, which I only use it not because it's meant to be the golden emblem of assessment quality, but it was something we had a lot of data for that was very consistent, and so we used to analyze that in a way that did show longitudinally and in a looking at other high-performing districts, how not only did we achieve, but how did our value add, how did that impact from year to year, from 3rd grade to 8th grade, where was our relative performance and growth, and it was extremely strong. And so we have that historical data, and what's nice is it's clean. It was all from one data set, and it could be, so I guess we're up for challenges, as you know, and we're closer than any sort of alignment or agreement at this table than we've been, quite frankly, and greater clarity, so which I thank you for that, because what was happening before is the district was getting out and the board then was behind, and it was causing more concern and questions. So now that we're starting to get a clear idea of what the board wants and what the comfort level and confidence you have in this information, it's helpful. And you're able then to support us and support this area so we're not getting out ahead of you, if that makes sense. So we can certainly tell a story in a succinct manner, and we can do that. I just want to let you know that we're going to be shifting from different data sets because, and I'm really honest, that you're going to go from ISAT to PARC, from STAR to MAP, and STAR doesn't even have use. So we have to, we can do it, but we're just going to, it's not going to be quite as an efficient access point as having one single data point that we've had for the time.
Right, and I would just.
Or if we just do it going forward, you know,
Right.
from here on out. We've got MAP starting last
And
year.
so, yeah, and
So there may be a few years where we have to gather data, but to me, going back to those, you're going to be
So I just want to
all
have
over the board.
clarity around this because, you know, I wish we could create something, but we can't. But then we have to, you know, use what we have available to us. So.
But we should be able to start doing that now.
Yes.
For the kids that started taking MAP a year ago.
Yes.
But we're sort of, we go through this process, right? There's what, then there's so what, and then there's now what. Yeah, and we're at the phase where it's the what. We just got the data.
Right.
Let's just be fair, right? And you challenge us to think about, it's too early. We've just got the what answer. Now we have to answer the so what part. What does it all mean? And I would suggest that as important as what the data show is what we do with the data, right? And how we communicate that to the community, right? There's the kind of outcome-based narrative, which I get, but there's also the, hey, listen, we're good at understanding what the data mean and at reacting and where we need to intervene and where we need to support or accelerate, right? For those kids who, you know, can take on a little bit more. That's the piece that I want to make sure we keep in balance as a board. And not oversteer on just the outcome, because it is a process, right? The third grade parent, let's make sure we've got them set in the right mindset.
I was that parent. I mean, you know, I just like Matt, I looked at a couple of those scores and went, woo.
Yeah.
But I guess just being all at the same starting point is all that we really can get to today. If everyone is sort of at the same spot, then your question of so what and now what are sort of the next levels that we need to look at as a board.
And it's up to us, I think, to hold ourselves to moving through the answering those questions.
Great. So just to make sure that there's a lot of talk, so I'm not trying to rehash this. I just want to make sure we clear direction. So so the now what is next board meeting, we'll have a district improvement plan. You'll see school improvement goals, which just, you know, don't specifically do with this data. It helps close that whole child approach to the rest of our vision statement. So the district improvement plan helps respond and impact the schools through read and math, and you're going to see the school improvement plan talk more about the other important goals of the whole child, the community approach to the work we do. So that'll be next month. We have we want to looking at starting from this point forward and creating some sort of easy to read reporting mechanism of the data that shows the performance and growth over time, as much data that we can to overlap that by cohort to even increase the reliability of it, to be able to have a mechanism to do that. And you know, Phil, you've done that in other places too, so I know there's a mechanism for that. And we can continue to do that. And then with that, have that easy, not only the outcome based, but that easy to tell kind of associated story with it that says who we are, why do we do this, and it's not. I know we like narratives in this district, but we don't want narratives. We want succinct data points that
Editing
really
is powerful.
That has to be powerful, right? Okay.
Editing is good.
Editing, wordsmithing, right? So that's what we're looking for. And this is a carryover conversation, but I do feel like we're making progress. And I think I want to be able to say too with confidence that there is, and I don't want to, I'm verifying this right now, there's confidence that we're better at sharing the data. You have some input for us for how to even refine it further, that our students are doing well. I know you're not ever all the same place with that, but there is, and I didn't hear from anybody today, there's a concern that there is a egregious issue in our district about students' performance and achievement and growth, that we're staying the course, we're working through this, we're analyzing this, and we're really refining this and making sure we can not only share the outcomes, but share what we do when we see data that we need to respond to. Is that fair? Okay. That was a nice short presentation, Barry.
Thank you, and thank all the members of the board and everybody else. Again, it's been a team approach here with our deep dives into data, and I think it really is actually translating to better experiences and better results for our kids, and we look forward to next month presenting our district improvement plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry, for working and preparing all this information. Okay.
All right, so we're moving on.
Yep.
Consent agenda. Let's see if I can still read. Okay, a motion is requested that the school board approve the consent agenda, which includes the following. Payroll and invoices for the period September 22nd, 2017 through October 17th, 2017 as follows. Payroll net $1,257,333.47. Invoices of $2,235,292.53 for a total of $3,492,626 even. Board meeting minutes, Facilities Subcommittee meeting minutes, August 29th, 2017. Financial Subcommittee meeting minutes, September 8th, 2017. Public hearing on the fiscal year 18 budget minutes, September 19th, 2017. Regular school board meeting minutes, September 19th, 2017. School board special meeting, September 28th, 2017. Personnel report, employment classified staff, resignation classified staff, change of status certified staff, change of status classified staff. Authorization to destroy verbatim records of the closed meetings dated April 28th, 2015, May 19, 2015, June 9th, 2015, August 18, 2015, September 26, 2015, October 20th, 2015, November 7th, 2015, December 3rd, 2015, December 15th, 2015, January 26th, 2016, New Year, February 23rd, 2016, which are at least 18 months old and for which approved minutes already exist. May I have a roll call?
Okay.
Do I need a roll call or a motion? Okay, may I have
I'll
a
make that
motion?
motion.
Thank you. Okay, roll call, please.
Okay, Mr. Koenig?
Yes.
Mr. Holsizer?
Yes.
Ms. Pelkey?
Yes.
Mr. Cirillis?
Yes.
Ms. Livingston?
Yes.
Mr. Rattell?
Yes.
Mr. Robbins?
Yes.
Okay. Other business. Okay, well, now I have board members report on the meetings, school visits.
Right, the action item was struck because we didn't.
No, I'm moving down because I'm supposed to give you an update on what happened.
Yes,
with
no,
it.
I was
And
just
that's
telling
okay.
the public that we didn't
Oh,
have an
okay.
inter-district transfer.
Okay. Oh, okay, right. So, what we did in the foundation meeting was there was a cute little kid that came up with his 2 iPads and he put them on a tripod and he showed us all the exciting things that he can do in making a iPad turn into a kind of like a movie camera. Oh, yeah, exactly. He was very proficient at what he was doing. So it was something that the foundation provided money for so that they could have an iPad and basically create it was like a TV studio kind of thing going. So the foundation also told us about their healthy fundraising efforts, and I think their donations are at least on healthy pace, if not ahead of last year. They had a great, successful Fall Fest booth at the September Park District event, and they should have an annual report that's going to be distributed hopefully this fall. So then, is there anything at the NSSED that jumps out?
Okay, jumps out. NSSED is still working on, or they are engaged in the strategic plan. They're incorporating, they had a workshop, and they're incorporating feedback on a person-by-person basis, not a survey. They have an extra almost $800,000 in a fund account, but they don't know how to, they have no plans yet on how to spend it. They're looking to correct a budget gap between expenses and revenue in the 5-year forecast. And they're talking about perhaps purchasing one of their buildings instead of leasing it to save money long-term. It was pretty financial based meeting.
We've talked about kindergarten visits, I think. Okay, we have calendar subcommittee meeting for you. October the 18th, 2017, 3:50 to 5 p.m. And there's policy subcommittee meeting. Is that tomorrow? No. The 19th, 8:30 to 9:30 a.m. We also need for people to look at their availability for the Future Ready community meeting on the 24th that they talked about. What is it?
Global perspective.
Global perspective.
Do you want, because it doesn't matter to me when I go, but you can't have everybody at the AM and know
Does
it.
anybody know now that they can make one?
I can't make the evening one, but I would prefer to go to the
9:15?
9:15. I think I need to look at my calendar. I'm old fashioned enough to have that on paper.
I can do the evening, I can't do the morning.
Okay, so first one for each. One more spot.
I will do one or the other, I just feel okay.
So we will coordinate with Jennifer, because then you'll do opposite each other.
Yeah, it doesn't matter to me, just let you know. Just have to figure out how much.
And then Linda will follow up with the facility subcommittee. We're trying to get that meeting scheduled for October 30th, around that time.
Yet, right?
No, so she'll send that to you and try to get a time for that.
What is the facility subcommittee's charge now with the core committee? Because I feel like we kind of.
What they're going to be doing is I think we updated this obviously last meeting, but they gave the nod for our site visits and to potentially look out of state for some site visits, but knowing that we want to be very careful with and targeted with those visits. What are we looking for? Be able to justify real specifically why would the district be incurring some cost to help some of our core team members travel or associated costs. It's basically to get a plan for that sort of out of state.
So that's the only. So I guess
that's what their purpose is right now, right? Is to help just monitor any sort of. We did the facility assessment, which is phase 1, so that was good. And a carryover from that was the site visit. Then now at this point, they will probably go dormant until we come back later on in the process. Make sense? Public comment?
Any public comment? Nobody's awake anymore.
My daughter,
Oh, I was like, did she want to say?
I'm single parenting tonight.
Okay, may I have a motion to adjourn this
So
meeting?
moved.
Second, I guess. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.